The crystal chandelier cast diamonds of light across the marble floor as Ethan Brooks stood frozen, his waiter's tray trembling in his hands. Across the crowded ballroom, he watched a woman in an emerald gown press her palm against her scarred cheek, while three men in $1,000 suits laughed loud enough for half the room to hear. The CEO's daughter was crying, and every single person at this gala was pretending not to notice. This is the story of one dance that changed everything. If you're watching from Chicago, New York, Tokyo, or anywhere else in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit that like button. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The November wind cut through Ethan's jacket like a blade as he stepped off the bus 3 blocks from the Harrington Grand Hotel. He was already 10 minutes late, and Marco, the catering manager, had made it brutally clear during yesterday's briefing that tardiness meant immediate dismissal. No second chances, not at an event this prestigious. Ethan broke into a jog, his breath forming white clouds in the Chicago evening air. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Sophie's babysitter confirming bedtime again. He'd check it later. Right now, he needed this job. This one night of serving champagne to people who spent more on watches than he earned in 6 months would cover Sophie's daycare for 2 weeks and put another chunk toward his automotive technician certification. The hotel's golden facade blazed against the darkening sky. Ethan slipped through the service entrance, where the contrast hit him immediately. The narrow concrete hallway smelled of industrial cleaner and yesterday's garbage, a stark reminder that people like him only existed in the spaces between luxury. "Brooks, you're late!" Marco's voice echoed off the cinder block walls. The catering manager stood beside a rack of pressed white shirts and black bow ties, his face already flushed with the stress of managing a 500-person corporate gala. "Shirts on the rack, tie it tight, and get to station 7. You're covering the west balcony." "Sorry, Marco, the bus—" "Don't care." Marco thrust a tablet toward him. "Sign in, grab your tray assignment, and stay invisible. These people don't want to see you, they don't want to talk to you, they want their glasses full and their plates cleared. Your furniture, understand?" Ethan swallowed the familiar burn of humiliation and nodded. He'd heard variations of this speech at every high-end catering gig. Stay quiet, stay small, remember your place. He changed quickly in the staff bathroom, knotting his bow tie with practiced efficiency. The mirror showed him what he already knew: dark circles under his eyes, a jawline that could use a proper shave, calluses on his hands from the construction job he'd worked that morning before his afternoon shift at the auto shop. 30 years old and constantly exhausted, wearing borrowed clothes to serve people who'd never know his name. But when he thought of Sophie's gap-toothed smile when he'd tucked her in that morning, when he remembered the way she'd wrapped her small arms around his neck and whispered, "You're the best daddy ever," none of this mattered. He'd carry trays until his arms fell off if it meant giving her a better life than the one he'd had. The transformation was complete when Ethan pushed through the service doors into the ballroom proper. The Harrington Grand's crystal ballroom lived up to its name. 3 massive chandeliers dripped light across marble floors, so polished they reflected the ornate ceiling frescoes. Round tables draped in ivory silk surrounded a central dance floor, each centerpiece an explosion of white roses and gold-dusted branches. A string quartet played soft classical music from a raised platform, their notes floating through conversations conducted in the hushed tones of the wealthy. Ethan grabbed his assigned tray from the service bar, champagne flutes arranged in perfect rows, and began his circuit. Station 7 covered the west balcony section, 15 tables occupied by Chicago's elite. He recognized faces from magazine covers and news broadcasts, tech moguls, real estate developers, the kind of people who shaped cities with phone calls and handshakes. "More champagne." A woman in a silver gown didn't look up from her phone as she thrust her empty glass toward Ethan. "No, please." "No, thank you. Just expectation." He replaced it smoothly and moved on. Finally, a red-faced man in a tuxedo grabbed 2 glasses from Ethan's tray without acknowledging his existence. "Service is slow tonight." Ethan kept his expression neutral, invisible. Just furniture. The evening progressed in a blur of refilled glasses and cleared plates. His feet ached in the cheap dress shoes he'd bought secondhand, and his lower back had started its familiar protest from hours of careful posture. But he'd done harder work. Last winter, he'd pulled double shifts at a warehouse loading dock while Sophie recovered from pneumonia. That had been brutal. This was just uncomfortable. Around 8 o'clock, the string quartet paused and a distinguished man in his 60s took the small stage. Richard Harrington, founder and CEO of Harrington Industries, commanded immediate attention. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his custom tuxedo cut to emphasize still broad shoulders despite his age. But it was his presence that truly dominated, the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Good evening." Richard's voice carried effortlessly across the ballroom. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate another successful year and to support the Chicago Arts Initiative. Your generosity has already raised over $2 million for arts education in underserved communities." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Ethan stood against the wall with the other servers, tray balanced on his palm, watching the performance of wealth and philanthropy. "Before dinner service begins," Richard continued, "I want to introduce some special guests. My executive team has worked tirelessly this year." Ethan's attention drifted as Richard began calling names, each person standing to acknowledge applause. These introductions could take 20 minutes. He scanned his section, checking for empty glasses or guests signaling for service. That's when he saw her. At a table near the edge of the dance floor, partially hidden behind an elaborate centerpiece, sat a woman in an emerald gown. She was younger than most guests, maybe late 20s, with dark hair swept into an elegant updo that exposed a long, graceful neck. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. Even from across the room, Ethan could see she didn't belong to the easy confidence of the other guests. Her shoulders curved slightly inward, her posture defensive despite the expensive dress, and she was completely alone at a table set for 8. And finally, Richard's voice drew Ethan's attention back to the stage. "My daughter, Lena Harrington, who serves as Director of Community Outreach for our foundation." Smattering applause. Nothing like the enthusiasm for the executives. Ethan's gaze returned to the woman in emerald green. She didn't stand, didn't acknowledge the introduction, just sat there, statue still, as if hoping invisibility might swallow her whole. He understood that feeling intimately. Richard concluded his remarks, and the quartet resumed playing. The energy in the room shifted as guests stood mingling between tables in the pre-dinner social hour. Ethan returned to his circuit, refreshing drinks and clearing appetizer plates. He was replacing champagne glasses at a nearby table when he first heard the laughter. "Did you see what she's wearing?" The voice came from 3 men in tuxedos, clustered near a marble column about 10 feet from the woman in green. They weren't being particularly quiet. "All that money and she still can't make herself presentable." Ethan's hand stilled on the champagne flute. "Richard should have left her home," another man said. "Bad for the company image having her sitting there like some kind of charity case." "The scar makes people uncomfortable," the third added. "I heard she refuses plastic surgery. Imagine being that stubborn when daddy's paying." The laughter that followed was ugly, entitled, the sound of people who'd never experienced consequences. Ethan's jaw tightened. He turned slightly, just enough to see the woman, Lena, at her table. Her left hand had risen to her face, covering her left cheek. Her shoulders were trembling almost imperceptibly. She'd heard every word. "Excuse me, sir?" A guest was trying to get Ethan's attention. "Can we get more champagne over here?" "Of course." Ethan forced his feet to move, delivering drinks on autopilot while his mind churned. "Not your business. Just do your job. Stay invisible." But the men by the column weren't finished. "My wife asked Richard why Lena wasn't married yet," one was saying. "He just changed the subject. What man would want to wake up to that face every morning?" More laughter. Casual cruelty delivered like punchlines at a comedy show. Ethan glanced toward Lena again. She was staring at her plate now, that hand still pressed against her cheek. In the chandelier light, he could see the moisture in her eyes, the way she was fighting to keep her composure in a room full of people who saw her as a spectacle. Something in his chest cracked. He thought of Sophie, of the kids who'd teased her at daycare last month because her shoes came from a thrift store. He remembered the white-hot rage he'd felt, the helplessness of knowing he couldn't always protect her from cruelty. The caregiver had assured him she'd handled it, but Ethan had seen the hurt in his daughter's eyes that evening. Nobody had stood up for her in that moment. Nobody had made those kids understand that their words had weight, that a person's worth wasn't measured in new shoes or perfect appearances. Lena Harrington sat alone in a ballroom full of people, surrounded by wealth and privilege, and nobody was standing up for her either. Marco's voice echoed in his memory. Your furniture. These people don't want to see you. Ethan set his tray on the service bar. His hands were steady as he straightened his bow tie, brushed invisible lint from his jacket. His pulse hammered in his ears. This was stupid, reckless. He'd lose the job, lose the night's pay, maybe get blacklisted from every catering company in Chicago. But sometimes the right thing and the smart thing weren't the same. He crossed the ballroom with purpose, aware of curious glances tracking his movement. Servers didn't walk through the guest area unless carrying something. They especially didn't approach occupied tables. Lena didn't notice his approach until he stopped beside her chair. Up close, he could see the scar those men had mocked, a pale line that traced from her left temple down across her cheek to her jaw. It looked old, fully healed, just part of her face. Not monstrous, not hideous, just a mark that told a story he didn't know. What struck him more was her eyes when she finally looked up, deep brown, intelligent, currently brimming with barely controlled tears. Excuse me, Ethan said quietly. The quartet was playing a waltz, strings swelling in gentle rhythm. I know this is unusual, but would you like to dance? The words hung in the air between them. Around them, conversations died mid-sentence. The three men by the column fell silent, heads turned throughout the nearest tables. Lena stared at him, confusion and suspicion warring in her expression. What? Would you like to dance? Ethan kept his voice gentle, the same tone he used when Sophie woke from nightmares. You don't have to. I just thought, you look like you could use a reason to stand up. You're a waiter. Her voice was soft, cultured, with an underlying tremor. You're not supposed to. I know. Ethan offered his hand, palm up, leaving the choice entirely to her. And you're absolutely right to say no, but I'm asking anyway. Behind him, he heard Marco's sharp intake of breath. The manager must have noticed the disturbance. Ethan had maybe 30 seconds before he was physically removed from the ballroom. Lena's gaze dropped to his extended hand. Her fingers trembled against her cheek. Every muscle in her body screamed tension, fear, the defensive posture of someone who'd learned to expect humiliation. Why? She whispered. Because nobody should sit alone while people mock them. Because kindness costs nothing but can mean everything. Because his daughter deserved to grow up in a world where strangers stood up for each other. Because, Ethan said simply, everyone deserves at least one good dance. The silence stretched. Ethan could feel dozens of eyes on them, could sense the ripple of shock spreading through the ballroom. A waiter asking the CEO's daughter to dance. Unthinkable. Outrageous. Lena's hand dropped slowly from her face. She looked at him. Really looked at him, searching for mockery or hidden agenda. Whatever she saw made something shift in her expression. She reached out and placed her hand in his. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Ethan helped her stand, noting how she moved with practiced grace despite her obvious nervousness. Up close, she was nearly his height in her heels. The emerald gown was simple but elegant, the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. He led her toward the dance floor, aware of the weight of every stare, every whispered comment. He'd never danced in front of people before, had barely danced at all. His only experience came from swaying with Sophie in their tiny living room when she insisted they have princess parties. This was going to be a disaster. They reached the center of the floor, beneath the largest chandelier. Ethan turned to face Lena, positioning his right hand carefully on her waist, holding her left hand in his right. She was rigid, every muscle locked. I should probably mention, Ethan murmured as the quartet's music swelled around them, that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. A surprised sound escaped Lena, not quite a laugh, but close. You asked me to dance without knowing how? I know the basics. Sway, don't step on your partner's feet, try not to fall over. He began leading her in a simple box step, the most basic waltz pattern he'd seen on YouTube when Sophie had demanded dance lessons. Everything else is improvisation. You're insane. But some of the tension left her shoulders. Probably. Ethan guided her through a turn, miraculously keeping time with the music. But you're standing up. That's what matters. They moved together awkwardly at first, finding rhythm. Lena's hand was cool in his, her palm slightly damp with nervous sweat. She held herself carefully, as if afraid to fully commit to the moment. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. You'll lose your job. Maybe. Ethan met her eyes. But those men didn't have to be cruel either, and they chose it anyway. I'm just choosing differently. Something flickered in her expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. You heard them. Everyone heard them. They wanted to be heard. He led her through another turn, gaining confidence. But they're wrong. About all of it. You don't know that. Lena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You don't know anything about me. I know you deserved better than sitting alone while people treated you like a spectacle. I know that whatever story that scar tells, it doesn't define your worth. And I know that anyone who can't see past it to the person underneath isn't worth your time. Lena's breath hitched. Her grip on his hand tightened. They continued dancing, the initial shock of the moment fading into something quieter. The waltz surrounded them, strings painting emotion in the air. Ethan found himself actually enjoying it, not the attention or the defiance of social rules, but simply the act of connection. When was the last time he'd touched another adult with gentleness? When had anyone touched him without transaction, without purpose beyond shared humanity? What's your name? Lena asked. Ethan Brooks. Why did you really ask me to dance, Ethan Brooks? He considered the question as they moved across the floor. The honest answer was complicated, bound up in memories of his daughter and his own experiences of being invisible, in the simple truth that he'd seen suffering and couldn't walk away. I have a daughter, he said finally. She's 5, and when I saw you sitting there dealing with that cruelty alone, I thought about what I'd want someone to do if that was her someday. I'd want someone to stand up, to make her feel seen and valued, even if just for a moment. Lena's eyes glistened. That's a good answer. It's the truth. Ethan guided her into another turn, this one smoother than the last. You're smiling, by the way. I am? She seemed surprised by her own expression. First time tonight, I'd guess. First time in a long time. Lena's smile widened slightly, becoming more genuine. This is completely inappropriate, you know. The staff doesn't fraternize with guests. I'm aware. Pretty sure I'm fired. My father will be furious. Probably. The gossip will be everywhere by morning. Guaranteed. And you still asked. Ethan met her eyes fully. And I'd ask again. The music swelled toward its conclusion. Other couples had joined them on the dance floor now, the spell of shocked silence broken. But Ethan barely noticed them. He was focused on the woman in his arms, on the way her defensive posture had gradually relaxed, how the trembling had stopped and genuine peace had settled into her features. As the final notes faded, they slowed to stillness. Lena's hand lingered in his for a moment before she stepped back. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing me. Thank you for trusting me enough to stand. A slight commotion near the edge of the floor drew their attention. Marco was pushing through the crowd, his face thunderous. Behind him, Richard Harrington himself was approaching, expression unreadable. This is it, Ethan murmured. The consequences. But before Marco could reach them, something fell from Ethan's jacket pocket, a worn piece of fabric fluttering to the polished floor. It landed between him and Lena, pale blue cloth faded with age and washing. Lena bent to retrieve it before Ethan could move. You dropped this. It was just a handkerchief, nothing special. The cotton was soft from years of use, one corner embroidered with initials that had faded to barely visible threads. M.H. Ethan reached for it, but Lena had frozen, staring at the embroidery. The color drained from her face. Where did you get this? Her voice was sharp, urgent. It belonged to a friend, a long time ago. Why, Lena! Richard Harrington's voice cut through the moment. He'd reached them, Marco at his heels. But Richard wasn't looking at Ethan with anger. He was staring at the handkerchief in his daughter's hand, his face gone completely white. Is that the initials? Lena whispered. M.H. Father, look at the initials. Richard took the handkerchief with trembling hands. In the chandelier light, Ethan could see tears forming in the older man's eyes. Where did you get this? Richard's voice cracked. This belonged to my brother, Michael Harrington. He died 12 years ago. The ballroom seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. Michael, Captain Michael Harrington. The name and face crashed through his memory with devastating clarity. Afghanistan, Ethan heard himself say. Helmand Province. He was my commanding officer. Richard swayed slightly. Lena grabbed her father's arm, steadying him. That's impossible, Richard breathed. Michael's unit, the explosion, there were only 3 survivors. 4. Ethan's throat felt tight. There were 4 of us. Michael, Captain Harrington, he went back into the building. There was a kid inside, a local interpreter's son. Michael got him out, but the secondary explosion, the memory was visceral, immediate, dust and blood and screaming. The captain's body covering his, pushing him toward safety, even as the walls came down. He shoved me out the door right before the roof collapsed, Ethan continued. His last order. He saved my life. Richard's hands were shaking so badly that Lena had to take the handkerchief before he dropped it. You knew my brother. He was the best man I ever served with. Ethan's eyes burned. He'd tried so hard to forget Afghanistan, to box up those memories and focus on building a life. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I had no idea you were his family. The silence that followed was profound. Around them, the ballroom had gone completely still. Every guest, every server, every member of the quartet was frozen, watching this impossible convergence of past and present. Marco, who'd approached ready to fire Ethan on the spot, stood motionless. The 3 men who'd mocked Lena had gone pale, suddenly understanding that they'd been cruel to the daughter of a man who'd lost his brother serving their country. Richard looked at Ethan as if seeing him for the first time. Not a waiter, not furniture. A person. A soldier who'd known his brother in those final days. What's your name? Richard asked. Ethan Brooks, sir. Ethan Brooks. Richard repeated it slowly, committing it to memory. Then without warning, he pulled Ethan into a fierce embrace. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for carrying his memory. The older man was crying openly now, 12 years of grief finding sudden, unexpected outlet. Ethan stood rigid in the embrace, overwhelmed. This wasn't how the night was supposed to go. He was supposed to serve drinks, collect his pay, go home to kiss Sophie goodnight. Instead, he danced with a lonely woman, discovered his old captain's family, and somehow bridged a gap between 2 worlds that were never supposed to touch. When Richard finally released him, the CEO turned to face his guests. His voice, when he spoke, carried the authority of someone used to commanding rooms. Everyone, please. Your attention. The whispers died instantly. This young man, Richard placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, knew my brother Michael, served with him, was saved by him. He paused, composing himself. Michael gave his life for his men, for strangers who became family. And tonight, one of those men showed my daughter the simple kindness that seems to have become so rare in our circles. Richard's gaze swept the room, landing pointedly on the 3 men by the column. They shrank under his stare. Some of you forgot yourselves tonight, forgot that cruelty has consequences, that words cause wounds. His voice hardened. I heard what was said about my daughter, and I want you to understand something. Lena's scar came from the same car accident that took her mother from us 8 years ago. She wears it with dignity because she survived, because she chose to keep living even when grief made that nearly impossible. Lena's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She'd clearly never heard her father speak about this publicly. My daughter is worth 10 of anyone who mocked her tonight, Richard continued, and the fact that a working man showed her more respect in 5 minutes than some of you have shown in years tells me exactly where the real class exists in this room. The ballroom was so quiet that Ethan could hear the champagne bubbles fizzing in nearby glasses. Mr. Winters, Mr. Chen, Mr. Roberts. Richard named the 3 men directly. I'll expect your resignations on my desk Monday morning. You're no longer welcome in my company or at my events. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The 3 men looked stricken, mouths opening and closing soundlessly. Father, Lena said quietly, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Richard's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. I should have done it years ago. Should have protected you better. I'm sorry, sweetheart. The moment was intensely private, yet playing out in front of 500 people. Ethan felt like an intruder witnessing it, but he couldn't move. His legs had forgotten how to work. Richard turned back to him. Ethan Brooks, what do you do? For work, I mean. Beyond catering. The question caught him off guard. Construction mostly, some mechanic work, whatever pays. Are you happy with that? Ethan considered lying, then decided this night was already too strange for pretense. No, sir. I'm saving for automotive technician certification. I want to open a small repair shop eventually. Something stable for my daughter. Your daughter? How old? 5. Sophie. She's everything. Richard nodded slowly, something calculating entering his expression. I'd like to speak with you before you leave tonight. Will you give me that opportunity? Yes, sir. Good. Richard addressed the room again. The gala will continue. Please enjoy your evening. Lena, may I speak with you privately? Lena squeezed Ethan's hand once, a quick, grateful gesture, before following her father toward a side door. The quartet started playing again, probably on someone's urgent signal. Conversations resumed, though every eye in the room remained fixed on Ethan. Marco appeared at his elbow. Well, the catering manager said, his voice strangled. That was unprecedented. Am I fired? Fired? Jesus, Brooks, I'm pretty sure you just got half the room fired instead. Marco shook his head in disbelief. Take your break. I'll cover your section. Something tells me Mr. Harrington isn't done with you yet. Ethan made his way to the service area in a daze. Other servers stared at him with mixtures of awe and envy. He'd broken every rule, committed the cardinal sin of visibility, and somehow emerged not just unscathed but embraced by the CEO himself. It felt surreal, wrong, almost. Good things didn't happen to people like him. He found an empty chair in the service corridor and sat heavily, pulling out his phone. 2 texts from Sophie's babysitter, one confirming bedtime, one sending a photo of Sophie asleep with her stuffed elephant. His daughter's peaceful face, completely unaware of the chaos her father had just caused. What would he tell her about tonight? How did you explain to a 5-year-old that sometimes standing up for someone meant risking everything, but that it was worth it anyway? Ethan? He looked up to find Lena standing in the corridor entrance, still in her emerald gown but with tears dried and makeup repaired. She'd composed herself, but vulnerability still lingered in her eyes. Hi. He stood automatically. Are you okay? I should be asking you that. She moved closer. What you did tonight, asking me to dance, the things you said, you changed something in me, in my father, in this whole terrible evening. I just wanted you to stop crying. It was more than that. Lena reached into a small clutch purse and withdrew a business card. My father wants to offer you a position, executive assistant track, with full benefits and tuition reimbursement for any training you want. Ethan took the card, reading the numbers without processing them. The salary listed would change his life overnight. Sophie could go to a better school. They could move out of their cramped apartment. He could stop working himself to exhaustion. That's incredibly generous. You saved my brother's life, Lena said simply. And you saved mine tonight, in a different way. My father takes those debts seriously. It wasn't a debt. I didn't dance with you expecting anything. I know. That's why the offer stands. She hesitated. There's something else. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to have coffee sometime, to talk. I'd like to know more about Uncle Michael, about what kind of man he was beyond family stories. And I'd like to know you, Ethan Brooks, the person behind the uniform. His heart did something complicated in his chest. When was the last time someone had wanted to know him? Not what he could do or provide, but actually him? I'd like that, he said honestly. But I should be clear, I'm a single dad with a demanding kid and very little free time. I don't have much to offer in terms of sophisticated conversation or... Stop. Lena's smile was genuine, reaching her eyes. I'm not asking you to be anything except yourself. That person is plenty interesting. They stood in the service corridor, worlds colliding in the space between a catering uniform and an evening gown. Around them, the gala continued, but this moment existed separate from it. 2 people who'd been invisible in different ways, seeing each other clearly for the first time. I should get back to work, Ethan said reluctantly. Marco covered for me, but it's not fair to... Actually, Marco's voice came from behind them. Mr. Harrington requested you be relieved of duties for the evening, with full pay. He wants to speak with you after the gala concludes. Of course he did. Ethan nodded, accepting another impossibility in a night full of them. Lena touched his arm lightly. Thank you again for everything. You're welcome. And Lena? You have a beautiful smile. I'm glad I got to see it. The blush that colored her cheeks made her look younger, less guarded. She squeezed his arm once before returning to the ballroom, leaving Ethan alone with the business card and a head full of questions about how a single decision to dance had unraveled into this. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Ethan watched from the sidelines as dinner was served, speeches were made, donations were pledged. The three men Richard had fired slipped out quietly before dessert, their disgrace complete. Other guests gave Ethan curious looks when they passed, but no one approached him. He was back to being invisible. But the nature of that invisibility had changed. Now he was the waiter with a story, the unexpected connection to tragedy and redemption. He wasn't sure he liked the attention, but he appreciated what it had meant for Lena. Around 11, as guests began departing, Marco found him again. Mr. Harrington is waiting in the Windsor suite, 3rd floor, east wing. He asked that you come when ready. Now is fine. The Windsor suite turned out to be a private conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. Richard Harrington stood at the windows, hands clasped behind his back, still in his tuxedo, but with jacket removed and sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but more at peace than he had earlier. Ethan, thank you for coming. Richard gestured to a leather chair. Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. Ethan sat carefully, feeling out of place in the elegant room. Richard took the chair opposite him, studying Ethan's face with intense focus. I need you to tell me about Michael. Everything you remember, please. So Ethan talked. He described Captain Harrington, disciplined but fair, the kind of leader who never asked his men to take risks he wouldn't take himself. He recounted the circumstances of that final mission, the explosion, the desperate rescue attempt. He shared the smaller memories too. Michael teaching younger soldiers to write letters home, his terrible jokes during long patrols, the photograph of his family he kept in his vest pocket. Richard listened without interrupting, occasionally wiping tears from his eyes. When Ethan finally fell silent, the older man sat quiet for a long moment. He wrote about you, Richard said finally, in his last letter home. He mentioned a young private who reminded him of himself at that age, determined, protective of others, too stubborn for his own good. That was you, wasn't it? Ethan's throat closed. He never told me that. Michael saw potential in people. He would be proud of who you've become, a father working multiple jobs to build a better life for his child. That takes a different kind of courage than combat. I'm just doing what's necessary. No, Richard leaned forward. You're doing what's right. There's a difference. Plenty of fathers do the bare minimum. You're fighting for more. The weight of those words settled around Ethan's shoulders like a mantle. I meant what I said about the job offer, Richard continued. But I'm also a businessman, and I don't make charity cases. I built my company by recognizing talent and potential. You demonstrated both tonight, not just in how you treated my daughter, but in your willingness to stand up when you had everything to lose. That's the kind of integrity I want in my organization. Mr. Harrington, Richard, please. Richard, Ethan corrected, I appreciate the offer more than I can express. But I need to be honest. I don't know anything about corporate culture or executive work. I'm a mechanic at heart. I think I'd be terrible at boardroom politics. Good. I have plenty of people skilled at boardroom politics. What I need are people who understand what real work looks like, who haven't forgotten what it means to struggle. Richard pulled out a folder from a nearby briefcase. Let me propose something different. You mentioned wanting automotive certification. What if instead of working for my company, I sponsored your education, full tuition, living expenses, healthcare coverage? In exchange, when you open your shop, you provide discounted fleet maintenance for Harrington Industries. We have over 200 company vehicles that need reliable, honest service. Ethan's hands trembled as he took the folder, scanning documents that outlined exactly what Richard had described. It was too much, too generous. Why? He asked. Why would you do this? Because my brother saved your life, and you honored his memory by being the kind of man worth saving. Because you showed my daughter kindness when she needed it most. Because I've spent too many years surrounding myself with people who care more about profit than people, and I'm tired of it. Richard's expression softened. And because I know what it's like to wish you could give a child the world. Let me help you give Sophie hers. The mention of his daughter's name undid something in Ethan's carefully constructed walls. Tears spilled down his cheeks, hot and unexpected. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Let me do this one good thing. Richard's own eyes were damp. Let me honor my brother's sacrifice by helping the man he saved build something meaningful. Ethan looked at the documents again, thinking of Sophie, of the possibilities this represented, a real education, a real career, stability. Yes, he whispered. Thank you, yes. They shook hands across the table, sealing an agreement that felt more sacred than any contract. There's one more thing, Richard said, pulling out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal Michael Harrington's military medals, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, others Ethan couldn't name through his tears. These belonged to the men he saved. You were one of them. Please, keep one. Keep his memory alive. Ethan couldn't speak. He carefully removed the Purple Heart, holding the weight of his captain's sacrifice in his palm. They talked for another hour, working through logistics and timelines. Richard would arrange enrollment in the best automotive program in Chicago, starting with the winter semester just 8 weeks away. Ethan would continue his current jobs until then transition to full-time student. Upon graduation, Richard's legal team would help establish the business properly. One condition, Richard said as they prepared to part. You let Lena help design the shop's community outreach program. She's brilliant at connecting businesses with underserved populations. And, he smiled slightly, I think she'd enjoy having a project with someone who sees her as more than Richard Harrington's scarred daughter. She's remarkable, Ethan said honestly. Anyone who can't see that past a scar isn't worth her time. Spoken like the man who asked her to dance, Richard clasped Ethan's shoulder. Thank you for that. She hasn't smiled like that in years. They exchanged contact information and scheduled a follow-up meeting. As Ethan prepared to leave, Richard stopped him one last time. My brother used to say that the measure of a man isn't in what he has, but in what he does when he has nothing. You proved that tonight, Ethan. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose, and you chose kindness anyway. That's rare. Hold on to it. Ethan left the hotel at midnight, stepping into cold November air that felt different than it had hours earlier. The same wind, the same city, but everything had changed. His phone showed 3 missed calls from the babysitter. He called back immediately. Mr. Brooks, thank goodness. Sophie woke up asking for you. She had a nightmare. Put her on, please. A rustling sound, then his daughter's sleepy voice. Daddy? Hey, baby girl. I'm here. What's wrong? I had a scary dream. When are you coming home? Soon, sweetheart. Very soon. Ethan's voice cracked. And when I get there, I'm going to tell you the most amazing story. About a dance and a medal and how sometimes good things really do happen. Promise? Promise. He ended the call and started walking toward the bus stop, the Purple Heart heavy in his pocket alongside the business card and folder of documents. Tomorrow he'd return to construction and mechanic work and the grinding exhaustion of multiple jobs. But beyond tomorrow, a different future waited, all because of one dance. All because he'd seen someone suffering and decided not to look away. The bus arrived, nearly empty at this late hour. Ethan claimed a seat near the back and watched Chicago pass by the window, a city of millions, each person fighting invisible battles, carrying invisible wounds. How many Lenas were out there, sitting alone while the world passed cruel judgment? How many people just needed someone to see them, really see them? For one honest moment, he thought of Sophie, of the world she'd inherit. Maybe if enough people chose kindness over cruelty, courage over comfort, that world could be better. Maybe one dance at a time, one moment of connection at a time, the tide could shift. It was a foolish hope. Naive, probably. But as Ethan Brooks rode through the dark Chicago night toward his sleeping daughter, an uncertain tomorrow, he held on to it anyway. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is believe in goodness. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, goodness believes in you back. The apartment was dark when Ethan finally pushed through the door at midnight. He moved quietly through the cramped living room, stepping over Sophie's scattered toys with practiced precision. The babysitter, Mrs. Chen from down the hall, was dozing on the couch with late-night television flickering across her weathered face. "Mr. Brooks!" She startled awake, fumbling for her glasses. "You're home." "I'm so sorry it's late." Ethan pulled out his wallet, counting bills. "I know we said 11 at the latest." "Don't worry about it." Mrs. Chen waved away the extra 20 he offered. "Sophie was an angel, as always. The nightmare passed after she talked to you. She's sleeping soundly now." After Mrs. Chen left, Ethan stood in the doorway of Sophie's room, watching his daughter sleep. She was curled around her stuffed elephant, dark hair spread across her pillow, one small hand tucked under her cheek. In the dim glow of her nightlight, she looked impossibly small, impossibly precious. He thought about Richard's offer, about the folder of documents sitting in his jacket pocket, about a future where he wouldn't have to choose between paying rent and buying Sophie new shoes, where maybe next month wouldn't be his constant refrain to her questions about swimming lessons or art classes. "I'm going to give you the world, baby girl," he whispered. "I promise." Sophie stirred but didn't wake. Ethan kissed her forehead gently before retreating to his own room, exhausted but too wired to sleep. He pulled out the Purple Heart, turning it over in his hands. Captain Michael Harrington's face materialized in his memory, stern but kind. The type of leader who remembered every soldier's name and hometown. The captain had saved his life. And tonight, 12 years later, that salvation had come full circle in ways Ethan never could have imagined. He finally slept around 3 in the morning, the medal carefully placed on his nightstand beside a photo of Sophie on her first day of preschool. The alarm shrieked at 6, Sunday morning, which meant the construction site would be quiet. But Ethan had promised to help his buddy Marcus with a plumbing job at a rental property across town. He dragged himself out of bed, muscles protesting, and started coffee. Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway as sunlight began filtering through their threadbare curtains, elephant clutched to her chest, hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning, Daddy." She climbed into his lap as he sat at their small table. "You came home late." "I did. I'm sorry about that." He smoothed her hair down. "But I have something to tell you. Something really important." Sophie's eyes widened with 5-year-old curiosity. "Is it a good thing?" "It's a very good thing." Ethan considered how to explain it in terms she'd understand. "You know how Daddy's been working lots of jobs to save money?" "For your school, so you can fix cars better." "That's right. Well, last night, something amazing happened. I helped someone who needed help, and because of that, a very kind man is going to help us. He's going to pay for my school so I can learn to fix cars properly and open our own shop." Sophie processed this seriously. "Does that mean you won't have to work all the time?" The hope in her voice broke his heart. "Eventually, yes. I'll still work for a while, but then I'll go to school, and after that we'll have our own business. Things are going to get better, sweetheart." "Can I help at the shop?" Her face lit up. "I'm good at helping." "The best helper I know." Ethan hugged her tight. "And yes, when you're old enough, you can absolutely help. We'll put your name on the sign and everything." "Brooks and Brooks Car Fixing," Sophie announced proudly. "Perfect name." He kissed the top of her head. "Now how about pancakes before Daddy has to go help Uncle Marcus?" They spent the morning in easy companionship, Sophie chattering about her week at daycare while Ethan made pancakes shaped like elephants. These were the moments he lived for, the simple domestic peace that made all the struggle worthwhile. At 8, he dropped Sophie at his sister Rachel's place. Rachel took one look at his face and raised an eyebrow. "You look different. What happened?" "Long story." Ethan handed over Sophie's overnight bag. "I'll tell you everything tomorrow. Just, things might be changing. Good changes." Rachel's skepticism was earned by years of watching her younger brother fight uphill battles. "Okay, mysterious. Sophie and I are going to the park if the weather holds. Pick her up whenever you're done with Marcus." The plumbing job turned into a full bathroom renovation crisis when Marcus discovered water damage behind the walls. What should have been 3 hours stretched to 8, Ethan's back screaming as they tore out rotted drywall and replaced corroded pipes. By the time they finished, covered in plaster dust and exhausted, the sun was setting. "You're distracted today," Marcus observed as they loaded tools into his truck. "Everything okay?" Ethan considered telling him about the gala, about Richard Harrington's offer, but the story felt too fragile, too new, like speaking it aloud might make it disappear. Just tired. Long week. Tell me about it. Marcus clapped his shoulder. Thanks for the help. I'll get you your cut by Wednesday. Every dollar counted. Ethan pocketed the promise and caught the bus to Rachel's apartment, where Sophie greeted him with paint-stained hands and stories about feeding ducks. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Ethan was scheduled at the auto shop from 7 to 3, then had a catering shift that evening for a corporate lunch event. The weekend's events felt dreamlike in the harsh fluorescent lighting of Hanson's Auto Repair, where he spent hours changing oil and rotating tires while the mechanics handled more complex work. Brooks, phone call. Dale, the shop manager, hollered across the garage around 10. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, confused. Nobody called him at work. Who is it? Didn't say. Sounds official. The phone in Dale's cramped office was ancient, the handset worn smooth by decades of use. Ethan picked it up cautiously. Hello? Mr. Brooks, this is Jennifer Tan, assistant to Richard Harrington. Mr. Harrington asked me to reach out regarding the arrangements we discussed. Reality crashed back. The gala, the offer, the folder of documents, all of it real. Yes, of course. I'm sorry. I'm at work right now. I understand completely. I'll keep this brief. Mr. Harrington would like to meet with you Wednesday afternoon to finalize paperwork and introduce you to the program director at Chicago Technical Institute. Would 2 o'clock work for your schedule? Ethan's mind raced. Wednesday, he was supposed to work construction until 4. I'll make it work. Where should I meet you? Jennifer provided an address. Harrington Industries headquarters in the Loop. The meeting would last approximately 2 hours. She'd email confirmation and additional details to the address he'd provided Saturday night. After he hung up, Dale appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. Yeah, I might need Wednesday afternoon off, 2 to 4. I know it's short notice. Take it. Dale's gruff exterior hid a decent heart. You never ask for time off. Must be important. It is. Thank you. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Ethan worked mechanically, mind elsewhere, calculating schedules and possibilities. He'd have to quit the construction job eventually, and probably the catering gigs once school started. The thought of having a single, focused path forward felt both exhilarating and terrifying. That evening's catering shift was at a law firm's conference room, serving sandwiches and coffee to attorneys who barely acknowledged his existence. Back to being furniture, invisible and silent. But this time, the invisibility didn't chafe quite as much. He had a secret, a future these people couldn't see. Tuesday brought Sophie's parent-teacher conference at daycare. Mrs. Patterson, her teacher, was a warm woman in her 50s who genuinely cared about her students. Sophie is doing wonderfully, she said, showing Ethan finger paintings and letter practice sheets. She's bright, creative, and very empathetic with the other children. However, I wanted to mention that she's been asking a lot of questions about why she doesn't have a mommy. The words landed like a punch. Ethan had known this conversation would come eventually, but he'd hoped for more time. What did you tell her? I explained that families come in all shapes. Some have 2 parents, some have 1, some have grandparents or other arrangements. But she's definitely processing the difference between her situation and her classmates. Mrs. Patterson's expression was kind. It might be time to have a more detailed conversation with her about her mother. Ethan's ex, Melissa, had left when Sophie was 6 months old. No dramatic fight, no custody battle. Just a note on the kitchen counter saying she couldn't do motherhood, couldn't handle the responsibility. He'd come home from a double shift to find his infant daughter alone in her crib, screaming, and Melissa's closet empty. He'd tried to find her at first, worried something terrible had happened. But Melissa had made her choice clear. She'd signed away parental rights through a lawyer, sent divorce papers, and disappeared completely. That was over 4 years ago. As far as he knew, she was somewhere on the West Coast, living the untethered life she'd craved. I'll talk to her, Ethan promised. Thank you for letting me know. That night, after dinner, he sat Sophie down on the couch. Mrs. Patterson said you've been asking about mommies. Sophie's small face grew serious. Emma at school said I don't have a mommy because I was bad. White-hot anger flared in Ethan's chest. That's not true. Not even a little bit. You are perfect and wonderful, and what happened with your mom has nothing to do with you. Then where is she? How did you explain adult failure to a child? How did you make a 5-year-old understand that sometimes people weren't capable of the love they should give? Your mommy loved you, Ethan said carefully, but she wasn't ready to be a parent. Being a mommy or daddy is really hard work, and she realized she couldn't do it the way you deserved, so she made a choice to let me take care of you instead. Doesn't she miss me? I don't know, baby. Maybe she does. But here's what I know for sure. You have me, and Aunt Rachel, and Uncle Marcus, and Mrs. Chen, and Mrs. Patterson, and so many people who love you completely. Our family might look different than some, but it's full of love. That's what matters. Sophie considered this, processing with the gravity only children possess. Emma said families need mommies. Emma is wrong. Families need love, and we have plenty of that. Okay? Sophie leaned against him. Daddy, I'm glad you're my family. Ethan held her close, swallowing past the lump in his throat. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Wednesday arrived with unexpected November warmth, the temperature climbing into the low 50s under clear skies. Ethan dressed in his best clothes, khakis and a button-down shirt that had seen better days but were clean and pressed. He caught the train downtown, watching the city transform from his neighborhood's worn buildings to the gleaming towers of the Loop. Harrington Industries occupied 15 floors of a modern glass building that reflected the Chicago skyline in its surface. The lobby was all polished marble and contemporary art, the kind of space designed to intimidate. Ethan approached the reception desk where a professionally dressed woman looked up with practiced courtesy. Ethan Brooks, I have a 2 o'clock appointment with Mr. Harrington. She checked her computer. Of course, Mr. Brooks. Take the elevator to the 14th floor. Ms. Tan will meet you there. The elevator was glass-walled, offering dizzying views as it ascended. Ethan's stomach lurched, and not just from the height. This was really happening. He was really here, about to discuss a future he'd barely dared imagine. Jennifer Tan was waiting when the doors opened, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s wearing an immaculate suit. Mr. Brooks, welcome. Please, follow me. She led him through a maze of cubicles and offices, eventually reaching a corner conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Richard Harrington stood at the windows, on the phone, but smiled and gestured for Ethan to sit when he noticed them. I appreciate your understanding, Senator. We'll revisit the proposal next quarter. Richard ended the call and turned his full attention to Ethan. Thank you for coming. I hope getting away from work wasn't too difficult. My boss was understanding. Good. Richard sat across from him while Jennifer arranged folders on the table. I've spent the last few days working with our HR department and the admissions office at Chicago Technical Institute. Everything is arranged, pending your final approval. Over the next hour, they reviewed documents that outlined a comprehensive plan. Full tuition coverage for a 2-year automotive technology program, stipend for living expenses, health insurance for both Ethan and Sophie, and a guaranteed business loan upon graduation to help establish his repair shop. In exchange, Ethan would provide fleet maintenance services to Harrington Industries at a 15% discount for 5 years. This is too much, Ethan said for the 3rd time. The health insurance alone is non-negotiable. Richard's tone was firm. You're a father. Your daughter's well-being is paramount. Besides, my lawyers inform me this arrangement is entirely reasonable from a business perspective. We're investing in a future service provider while fulfilling corporate social responsibility goals. Jennifer slid another document across the table. This is a letter of acceptance from CTI. Classes begin January 6th. Your program director will be Dr. Sarah Chen, and she's excellent. I took the liberty of arranging a meeting with her for 4 o'clock today if you're available. Ethan's head spun. Today? Strike while the iron's hot, as they say. Richard smiled. I know this is overwhelming. Take your time reviewing everything. You don't have to sign today. But as Ethan read through the documents, seeing his future laid out in legal language, he felt certainty settle in his chest. This was right. This was the opportunity he'd been fighting toward for years. I don't need more time. He accepted the pen Jennifer offered. Where do I sign? They worked through the paperwork methodically, Jennifer explaining each section, Ethan initialing and signing. When it was done, Richard shook his hand firmly. Welcome to the Harrington Industries family, Mr. Brooks. I look forward to seeing where this journey takes you. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Richard's expression grew thoughtful. There's one more person who'd like to see you, if you have a moment before your meeting with Dr. Chen. Before Ethan could respond, a knock sounded at the conference room door. Lena Harrington entered, dressed in professional navy slacks and a cream blouse, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked different than she had at the gala. Less guarded, more present. I hope I'm not interrupting. Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes. Not at all. Richard stood. I'll give you two some time. Ethan, Jennifer will take you to CTY at 3:30. Lena, good luck with the proposal tomorrow. After Richard and Jennifer left, Lena took the seat her father had vacated. How are you? I've been thinking about Saturday night constantly. I'm well, still processing all of this, honestly. I can imagine. She folded her hands on the table. I wanted to thank you properly. Not just for the dance, but for what you said. About people who can't see past the scar not being worth my time. I've been carrying so much shame about this, she touched her cheek. About the accident. About surviving when my mother didn't. Your words helped me realize I've been hiding for the wrong reasons. You have nothing to be ashamed of. I'm starting to believe that. Lena's smile turned slightly mischievous. Which is why I did something possibly foolish. I asked my father to let me work on your shop's community outreach program. He mentioned you accepted the educational sponsorship. He did mention that possibility. Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. I'd be honored to work with you. Good, because I have ideas, lots of ideas. She pulled out a tablet, swiping through screens filled with notes and diagrams. What if your shop offered discounted services to single parents, or partnered with job training programs to provide internships? We could create a model that proves successful businesses can prioritize community impact. Her enthusiasm was infectious. They spent 20 minutes discussing possibilities, Lena's professional expertise evident in how she articulated vision and practical execution. This was clearly her element, creating bridges between resources and needs. I'm getting ahead of myself, she said finally, laughing. You haven't even started school yet, and I'm planning your entire business model. I like it. It's good to have goals beyond just survival. Lena's expression softened. That's what you've been doing, isn't it? Just surviving? For a long time, yeah. But things are changing. He met her eyes. Thanks in part to you. To us, maybe. I think we helped each other Saturday night. The moment stretched between them, comfortable and charged simultaneously. Ethan became acutely aware of the conference room's intimacy, of how Lena's presence seemed to fill the space with warmth. I meant what I said about coffee, Lena said quietly. I'd really like to get to know you better. Not as Richard Harrington's daughter or a business connection, just as people. Would that be okay? I'd like that too, though I should warn you my life is pretty unglamorous. Single dad schedules, small apartment living, very little free time. Sounds refreshingly real compared to my usual social obligations. She pulled out her phone. How's Saturday afternoon? There's a coffee shop near Lincoln Park with excellent pastries and a play area for kids. You could bring your daughter. The casual inclusion of Sophie in the invitation touched something deep in Ethan's chest. Most women ran when they learned about his parenting situation. Lena was leaning in. Sophie would love that. She's very social. Perfect, Lena typed quickly. I'll text you the details. And Ethan, bring your real self, okay? No polishing up for appearances. I get enough polished performance in my regular life. They exchanged numbers, and Jennifer appeared shortly after to escort Ethan to Chicago Technical Institute. The campus was a modern facility in an industrial neighborhood, all clean lines and well-equipped workshops. Doctor. Sarah Chen was a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Brooks, welcome. She shook his hand firmly. Richard Harrington spoke highly of you. Let me show you our facilities. The tour was impressive. State-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, well-maintained training vehicles, classroom spaces that blended theory with practical application. Dr. Chen explained the curriculum, a rigorous program that would qualify Ethan for ASE certification in multiple specialties. I'll be honest, she said as they stood in one of the main workshop bays. This program is demanding. Many students struggle to balance it with outside commitments. You'll be working 40-plus hours weekly between classroom and hands-on training. I'm used to long hours. So I understand, but there's a difference between physical labor and technical learning. The mental exhaustion can be harder to manage, especially with a child at home. Her expression wasn't unkind, just realistic. I'm not trying to discourage you. I want you to succeed, but that requires understanding what you're committing to. I appreciate the honesty. Ethan looked around the workshop, imagining himself here, finally learning proper technique instead of piecing together knowledge from YouTube videos and trial and error. I'm ready for the challenge. Dr. Chen studied him for a moment, then nodded. I believe you are. Welcome to CTY, Mr. Brooks. I'll see you in January. The train ride home felt surreal. In his bag, Ethan carried folders full of course catalogs, financial aid confirmations, and a welcome packet from CTI. The Purple Heart was there too. He'd taken to carrying it as a talisman, a reminder of sacrifice and second chances. He picked Sophie up from daycare, where she immediately launched into a story about building blocks and a conflict with another child over whose tower was taller. And then Mrs. Patterson said we should build together instead of competing, so we made the tallest tower ever. Sophie's hands illustrated the impressive height. Can we build blocks when we get home? Absolutely. Ethan swung her hand as they walked. But first I need to tell you something exciting. Remember how I said things were changing? You're going to school. That's right. Starting in January, I'm going to be a student, just like you. I'll go to class and learn about fixing cars properly. Sophie processed this with typical 5-year-old logic. Will you have homework? Probably a lot of homework. Can I help? I'm sure you'll be a great study buddy. They spent the evening in their tiny apartment, building block towers and eating simple pasta for dinner. After Sophie went to bed, Ethan sat at their kitchen table reviewing the course catalog, making notes about required materials and class schedules. The technical language was intimidating, but underneath the jargon was knowledge he'd been hungry for years to acquire. His phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Saturday at 2 p.m. works? The coffee shop is called Brewster's on Clark Street. Looking forward to it. Ethan stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. A coffee date with a beautiful, accomplished woman who seemed genuinely interested in knowing him. When was the last time he'd done anything remotely date-like? Before Sophie was born, probably. Before Melissa left and single parenthood consumed his identity. Sounds perfect. Sophie's excited to meet you, he typed back. The response came quickly. I'm excited to meet her too. Fair warning, I'm much better with adults than children, so apologies in advance if I'm awkward. She's very forgiving of awkwardness. You'll do fine. The week passed quickly. Ethan gave notice at the construction job, working his final shifts with a mixture of relief and anxiety. Marcus was supportive but skeptical. Corporate sponsorship sounds great until they own you, he warned over beers Friday night. Just watch your back. Richard's not like that. He's genuinely trying to help. Nobody helps without wanting something in return. That's just how the world works. Ethan understood his friend's cynicism. Marcus had been burned by enough people to earn it. But he'd looked into Richard Harrington's eyes, had seen genuine grief and gratitude there. This wasn't a transaction. It was something more personal. Saturday dawned clear and cold, the November warmth giving way to more seasonal temperatures. Ethan dressed Sophie in her favorite purple dress, slightly too small but still wearable, and the nice jacket Rachel had bought her for her birthday. He agonized over his own outfit before settling on dark jeans and a clean sweater, casual but presentable. Why are you nervous? Sophie asked as they rode the train toward Lincoln Park. It's just coffee. It's not just coffee. We're meeting a new friend and I want to make a good impression. Will she like me? Ethan pulled his daughter close. She's going to love you. How could she not? Brewster's was exactly as advertised. Warm lighting, mismatched comfortable furniture, and a corner play area filled with toys and books. Lena was already there, sitting at a table near the play space, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. She stood when she saw them, and Ethan noticed the slight hesitation before she smiled. You must be Sophie. Lena crouched to the little girl's level. I've heard so much about you. Sophie studied her seriously, then pointed at Lena's face. What happened to your cheek? Sophie! Ethan's mortification was instant. It's okay. Lena's voice was steady. It's a fair question. I was in a car accident when I was a bit older than you. This scar is what's left from where I got hurt. Does it still hurt? Not anymore. It did for a while, but now it's just part of my face. Sophie nodded, apparently satisfied. Okay, do you like elephants? The abrupt subject change made Lena laugh. I do, actually. Good. We can be friends then. Daddy, can I play? Ethan directed her to the play area, watching as she immediately began organizing stuffed animals into some elaborate imaginary scenario. When he turned back, Lena was smiling. She's wonderful, direct but sweet. I'm so sorry about the scar comment. Don't be. Children's honesty is refreshing compared to adults who stare but never ask. Lena gestured to the chair across from her. Besides, you told me to bring my real self. That includes explaining the scar when people ask. They ordered coffee and pastries, settling into conversation that flowed more easily than Ethan expected. Lena asked about Sophie's interests, his plans for school, what drew him to automotive work. He asked about her role at the foundation, her education, what filled her time beyond corporate galas. Honestly? Lena stirred her latte absently. I've been hiding for years, using work as an excuse to avoid social situations, turning down invitations, building walls. After the accident, after losing my mother, I just retreated. It felt safer than risking more loss. That's understandable. Maybe, but it's also lonely. She met his eyes. Saturday night, when you asked me to dance, you didn't see the scar or the CEO's damaged daughter. You just saw someone who needed kindness. That was the first time in years I felt truly seen. Ethan's chest tightened. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. Showing up to that gala, facing people who'd already proven they could be cruel, staying visible despite the pain. That takes more courage than hiding. Brave or stubborn? Can it be both? Her laugh was genuine, unguarded. They talked for over an hour, conversation ranging from serious to silly, finding unexpected common ground in their shared experiences of feeling invisible in crowded rooms. Sophie periodically interrupted, demanding Lena's attention for various play scenarios. To her credit, Lena engaged fully each time, letting Sophie assign her roles in elaborate games and asking questions that showed real interest. You're good with her, Ethan observed during one of Sophie's play intermissions. I'm faking it entirely, Lena admitted, but she makes it easy. She's so confident in her world, so certain that people will engage with her games. It's lovely. She hasn't learned to doubt herself yet. I'm trying to keep that innocence as long as possible. Lena's expression grew thoughtful. Can I ask you something personal? What happened with Sophie's mother? Ethan had known the question would come eventually. He gave her the abbreviated version, Melissa's departure, the divorce, 4 years of silence. That must have been terrifying, being left alone with an infant. Terrifying doesn't begin to cover it. The first few months I was convinced I'd mess up so badly that someone would take her away. Every time she cried, I thought I was failing. Every milestone felt like sheer luck rather than anything I was doing right. He watched Sophie arranging stuffed animals by size. But we figured it out together, made our own little family. You're a good father. That's obvious in everything you do. The simple acknowledgement hit harder than expected. Ethan fought the sudden burning in his eyes. Sorry, he managed. I'm not used to hearing that. Lena reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. The gesture was brief but meaningful. You deserve to hear it more often. They left the coffee shop as afternoon light began to fade, Sophie clutching a cookie Lena had bought her and chattering about a new stuffed elephant she wanted for Christmas. Thank you for this, Ethan said as they stood on the sidewalk. For making time, for being patient with Sophie, for just being here. Thank you for inviting me into your world. Lena smiled. Can we do this again? Maybe next time I could take you both to the Children's Museum? Sophie mentioned she loves dinosaurs. Sophie's squeal of excitement answered before Ethan could. Plans were made for the following weekend, phone numbers confirmed, and promises extracted from Sophie to be good all week so she'd earn the trip. On the train ride home, Sophie fell asleep against Ethan's shoulder, exhausted from social stimulation and sugar. He held her carefully, watching the city pass by the windows, feeling the weight of his changing life settle around him like a new coat that didn't quite fit yet but might, given time. His phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Sophie is delightful. You're raising an amazing human. See you next Saturday. Ethan smiled, typing one-handed. She had a great time. So did I. The response came quickly. Me too. This is the most normal I've felt in years. He understood exactly what she meant. For a few hours, they'd both been allowed to be simply themselves. No titles, no expectations, no performance. Just two people sharing coffee and conversation while a 5-year-old orchestrated elaborate elephant adventures. It felt like the beginning of something real. And after years of struggle and solitude, Ethan was ready to see where that beginning might lead. The children's museum trip became a cornerstone memory before it even happened. Sophie counted down the days with the fervent dedication only a 5-year-old could muster, crossing off each date on the kitchen calendar with elaborate X marks and occasional dinosaur drawings in the margins. Is it Saturday yet? Became her morning greeting, asked with hopeful eyes before Ethan had even finished his first cup of coffee. Not yet, baby. 3 more days. But that's forever. Ethan couldn't argue with her logic. The week did feel interminable, stretched thin by his final shifts at the auto shop and the mounting reality of his impending transition. Dale had been quietly supportive, even offering to write a recommendation letter for his student portfolio. You're doing the right thing, the shop manager said on Ethan's last day Friday afternoon, as they stood in the garage bay watching winter rain drum against the concrete. Too many guys waste their talent doing oil changes when they could be master technicians. Don't be one of them. I'll miss this place. No, you won't. Dale's gruff laugh echoed off the metal walls. You'll miss the paycheck, maybe, but not the grunt work. Besides, when you open that fancy shop, you better remember who gave you your start. They shook hands, and Ethan walked out of Hanson's auto repair for the last time with a final paycheck, a letter of recommendation, and the strange, hollow feeling that came with closing chapters. He'd worked there for 2 years, learned the rhythm of the place, built calluses, changing tires in winter cold and summer heat. Now it was just a memory. Another waypoint on a journey he was only beginning to understand. Saturday arrived with crystalline December weather, the kind of cold that bit through jackets but came paired with brilliant sunshine that made the city's grime sparkle. Sophie was awake before dawn, appearing at Ethan's bedside like a small, insistent ghost. "Daddy, Daddy, wake up! It's museum day!" He groaned, squinting at his alarm clock. 6:15. Sophie, we're not meeting Lena until 11. Go back to sleep. I can't sleep. I'm too excited. There was no arguing with that kind of enthusiasm. They spent the early morning making pancakes and watching cartoons, Sophie vibrating with anticipation while Ethan tried to quiet his own nervousness. This felt different than their first coffee meeting, more deliberate, more like a real date, despite Sophie's presence as the world's most energetic chaperone. He dressed carefully, dark jeans, a forest green Henley that Rachel had given him last Christmas, his good jacket. Sophie insisted on wearing her dinosaur shirt, a purple monstrosity covered in smiling T-Rexes that she loved with fierce devotion. You look beautiful, Ethan told her seriously as they prepared to leave. I know. Sophie's confidence was unshakable. Lena's gonna love my dinosaurs. They met at the museum entrance, a grand building in Lincoln Park with soaring glass atriums and colorful banners advertising current exhibits. Lena was waiting on the steps, bundled in a cream wool coat, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She waved when she spotted them, her smile bright and genuine. Ready for dinosaurs? She called as they approached. Sophie launched into immediate chatter, explaining her shirt's various dinosaurs and their respective characteristics with the authority of someone who'd watched every dinosaur documentary available on their streaming service. Lena listened with apparent fascination, asking questions that demonstrated she was actually paying attention. She's been talking about this all week, Ethan said quietly as they followed Sophie into the museum lobby. I've been looking forward to it too. Lena purchased their tickets over Ethan's protests about paying. My treat. I invited you, remember? The museum was magnificent, 4 floors of interactive exhibits designed to engage young minds. They started with the dinosaur hall, where Sophie immediately gravitated toward a replica Tyrannosaurus skeleton that dominated the central atrium. She stood beneath it, neck craned back, eyes wide with wonder. It's so big, she breathed. 67 million years old, these fossils, Lena read from the placard. Can you imagine something that ancient? That's older than Daddy, Ethan laughed. Thanks, sweetheart. Really feeling the love here. They wandered through exhibits, Sophie darting from display to display with boundless energy, while Ethan and Lena trailed behind. The museum was crowded with weekend families, the air filled with children's laughter and the ambient noise of discovery. In the chaos, something shifted between them. The slightly formal courtesy of their first meeting dissolved into easy companionship. I used to come here as a child, Lena said, as they watched Sophie attempt to dig for fossils in a sandpit exhibit. After my mother died, my father would bring me every Saturday. I think he didn't know what else to do with a grieving 13-year-old, so he just exposed me to as much wonder as possible, hoping something would stick. Did it work? Eventually. She smiled, but sadness lingered in her eyes. I spent about a year being angry at everything and everyone. The museum was one of the few places I could just be curious instead of furious. Ethan thought about Sophie's occasional questions about her mother, about the careful way he navigated those conversations. Sophie asks about her mom sometimes. I never know if I'm handling it right. You're honest with her, from what I've seen. That's probably the best you can do. Lena paused. My father tried to protect me from the truth about the accident, thought he was shielding me from pain, but the silence just made it worse. I invented scenarios in my head that were far more traumatic than reality. What actually happened, if you don't mind me asking? Lena was quiet for a moment, watching Sophie triumphantly hold up a plastic fossil she'd unearthed. We were driving home from a charity event. Winter roads, black ice. The car went into a spin, hit a guardrail. My mother wasn't wearing her seatbelt. She'd just unbuckled it to reach for something in the back seat. The impact threw her. Her hand rose unconsciously to her scarred cheek. I got this from broken glass, minor in comparison. I'm sorry. That's a terrible burden to carry. For a long time, I thought I should have died instead. Survivor's guilt wrapped up in teenage melodrama. Took years of therapy to work through that. She looked at him directly. But you understand that kind of guilt, don't you? Afghanistan. Ethan nodded slowly. The museum noise seemed to fade, creating a bubble of intimacy around their conversation. Every soldier who comes home carries it. Why did I survive when others didn't? What makes my life worth more than the ones lost? Captain Harrington saved 4 of us that day, but he didn't save himself. I used to wake up in cold sweats, convinced I didn't deserve the second chance he gave me. And now? Now I have Sophie, and I realize the best way to honor his sacrifice is to build something meaningful with the life he saved, to be the kind of person worth saving. He watched his daughter, her face lit with pure joy. She gives me purpose beyond guilt. Lena's expression was thoughtful. My father saw that in you, that drive to be worthy of the chances you've been given. It's why he wanted to help. I'm grateful every day for that. Sophie interrupted by dragging them to the next exhibit, a hands-on physics demonstration involving pulleys and levers. They spent the next hour being led through the museum by an enthusiastic 5-year-old tour guide who had opinions about everything from the model solar system to the aquarium tanks in the marine biology section. Around 2 o'clock, they broke for lunch in the museum cafe. Sophie demolished chicken nuggets while regaling Lena with increasingly elaborate stories about her daycare adventures. Ethan watched them interact, noticing how Lena had relaxed completely, her earlier nervousness about children apparently overcome by Sophie's straightforward acceptance. You're really good with her, he said, during a brief lull when Sophie went to examine the dessert case. She makes it easy. There's no pretense with children. They either like you or they don't, and they're honest about which. Lena smiled. It's refreshing after years of corporate politics where everyone has 3 hidden agendas. Is that what your work is usually like? More than I'd prefer. The foundation is better than pure business, but there's still posturing, still people using charity as networking opportunities rather than genuine desire to help. She traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass. I got into this work because I wanted to make my mother's death mean something. She was passionate about arts education, believed creativity was essential for developing empathy. I thought running the foundation's outreach would honor that. And does it? Sometimes. When I'm working directly with programs, seeing kids engage with art and music who wouldn't otherwise have access, those moments feel meaningful. But the fundraising, the galas, the endless courting of wealthy donors who want their names on buildings? She shook her head. That part feels hollow. Ethan understood the sentiment deeply. I spent years feeling like my work was hollow, just grinding away for paychecks, barely keeping my head above water. This chance your father's given me, it's the first time I've felt like I'm building towards something instead of just surviving day to day. What will you do with the shop? Beyond basic auto repair, I mean. You must have dreams for it. He'd been thinking about this constantly since their first coffee meeting, when Lena had casually mentioned community outreach possibilities. I want it to be a place that serves everyone, not just people who can afford premium rates. Sliding scale pricing for single parents and low-income families. Maybe partner with job training programs to offer apprenticeships. Create opportunities for people like me who need skills but can't afford traditional paths. Lena's eyes lit up. That's exactly the kind of social enterprise model I've been advocating for. Businesses that prioritize community impact alongside profit. Is it realistic, though? Can a shop actually survive operating that way? With the right structure and support, absolutely. There are successful models all over the country. She pulled out her phone, typing notes. I'd love to help you develop this. Not just the outreach piece, but the whole business model. Make it sustainable and replicable. They talked for another 20 minutes, ideas flowing between them with increasing excitement. Sophie returned with a brownie and proceeded to get chocolate on her face, shirt, and somehow her left ear. Lena laughed and helped clean her up with maternal instincts Ethan hadn't expected, but found deeply attractive. The afternoon stretched into early evening as they explored the remaining exhibits. In the planetarium show, Sophie fell asleep against Ethan's shoulder, exhausted by hours of stimulation. He held her carefully in the dark theater, acutely aware of Lena sitting close on his other side, her presence warm and steady. When the show ended and lights gradually returned, Lena looked over at sleeping Sophie and smiled. She's out completely. Museum coma. Happens every time we do something this exciting. Ethan shifted carefully, trying not to wake her. I should probably get her home. They made their way outside, where December darkness had fallen and temperature had dropped sharply. Ethan's breath formed clouds in the cold air as he adjusted Sophie's weight in his arms. Thank you for today, he said. This was really special. For me too. Lena hesitated, then stepped closer. Ethan, I need to be honest about something. I'm not good at this, dating or whatever we're doing. I haven't let anyone close in years. But I like you. I like your daughter. I like how I feel when I'm with you both. Like I can just be myself without armor. His heart hammered against his ribs. I like you too. But I need to be honest as well. I come with complications. A kid, limited time, a life that's not glamorous or exciting. I'm not sure what I have to offer someone like you. Someone like me? Her smile was sad. Ethan, I'm a 28-year-old woman who's been hiding from life for 8 years. I have one friend besides my father, no social life beyond work obligations and panic attacks before every public appearance. You think I'm some prize. I'm just as complicated as you are. Then maybe we're both too complicated for this to work. Or maybe, Lena said softly, we're exactly complicated enough to understand each other. Sophie stirred in his arms, mumbling something about dinosaurs. The moment hung between them, weighted with possibility and fear in equal measure. I'm scared, Ethan admitted, of messing this up, of letting you down, of Sophie getting attached, and then I disappoint you both the way everyone else in your life has, Lena finished. I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of waking up in 5 years still hiding, still alone, wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. She reached up and kissed him, quick and gentle, pulling back before he could fully respond. Sophie remained asleep on his shoulder, oblivious to the seismic shift in her father's world. Think about it, Lena said. No pressure, but I'd like to see where this goes, if you're willing. She flagged down a taxi before Ethan could formulate a response, climbing in with a final wave. He stood on the sidewalk holding his sleeping daughter, lips still tingling from that brief kiss, mind racing through implications and possibilities. The train ride home passed in a daze. Sophie woke briefly to stumble into their apartment and collapse into bed without dinner or pajamas. Ethan covered her with blankets and retreated to the kitchen, where he made tea he didn't drink and stared at nothing. His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. Sorry if I came on too strong. I tend to do that when I'm nervous. No response required. He typed and deleted several replies before settling on honesty. You didn't. I'm just processing. Today was amazing. You're amazing. I'm just not sure how to do this without risking too much. We could take it slow, keep seeing each other, no labels or pressure, just see what develops naturally. That sounds reasonable. Good. Because I already told my father I really like you, and he started planning our wedding, so no backing out now. Ethan laughed out loud, the tension breaking. Is he really that presumptuous? You have no idea. He's been waiting for me to show interest in anyone for years. I mentioned you once, and he immediately started discussing grandchildren. We've been on 2 dates. I know, it's mortifying, but also kind of sweet in an overbearing father way. They texted for another hour, the conversation flowing from serious to silly and back again. By the time Ethan finally went to bed, sometime after 11, his face hurt from smiling and something warm had settled in his chest where anxiety usually lived. Sunday he spent with Sophie, just the two of them, rebuilding their routine after a week of changes. They did laundry, cleaned the apartment, made cookies that came out slightly burned but edible. Rachel stopped by in the afternoon, taking one look at Ethan's face and raising an eyebrow. Okay, what happened? You look different. Different how? Happy, lighter, like you're not carrying the entire world on your shoulders for once. She settled on the couch while Sophie played nearby. Spill. He told her about Lena, about the museum trip, about the kiss. Rachel listened with the focused attention of someone who'd watched her younger brother struggle for years and desperately wanted him to find peace. She sounds wonderful, Rachel said finally. But you're terrified, aren't you? Is it that obvious? You haven't dated since Melissa. You're allowed to be scared. But Ethan, you can't let one terrible person ruin the possibility of finding someone good. It's not just about me anymore. Sophie gets attached so easily. If this doesn't work out, then you'll handle it the way you've handled everything else, by being honest with her and loving her through the hard parts. Rachel squeezed his hand. You deserve happiness. You deserve companionship. Don't talk yourself out of it before you've even given it a real chance. The following week was consumed by practical preparations for school. Ethan met with financial aid officers, purchased textbooks and tools, attended a mandatory orientation session where Dr. Chen outlined expectations with intimidating clarity. The failure rate for this program is approximately 40%, she told the assembled new students, a group of 20 ranging from fresh high school graduates to middle-aged career changers. Not because the material's impossible, but because students underestimate the commitment required. You'll be expected to master complex diagnostic procedures, electrical systems, computerized engine management. This isn't your grandfather's auto shop. This is modern automotive technology, and it demands your full attention. Ethan looked around at his future classmates, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces. These were people betting on themselves, investing in skills that could change their lives. He wasn't alone in this leap. He texted Lena that night. Orientation was intense. I'm definitely in over my head. That's how you know it's worth doing. Comfort doesn't teach us anything. They fell into a pattern of daily texts, sharing mundane details and deeper thoughts in equal measure. Lena sent photos of her lunch meetings with captions mocking corporate jargon. Ethan responded with pictures of Sophie's latest artistic creations, increasingly abstract finger paintings that covered their refrigerator. On Wednesday, Richard Harrington called personally. Ethan, I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to check in before you start classes next week. Not at all. I'm just doing some reading, getting familiar with the material. Excellent. Listen, I have a proposition. Lena mentioned you're still working some catering shifts to cover expenses until the stipend begins. Just a few. I need to keep some income through the end of the year. What if instead you did some work for me? Light consulting? Really? I'm developing a corporate sustainability initiative that includes updating our vehicle fleet to hybrid and electric models. I need someone who understands practical automotive considerations to review proposals. 20 hours a week through December, standard consulting rates. Ethan's mind reeled. Mr. Harrington, Richard, you've already done so much, I can't keep taking from you. You're not taking. I'm offering fair payment for legitimate work. I need your expertise, such as it is currently, and it'll grow as you advance in your studies. This benefits both of us. Richard's tone shifted, becoming more personal. Besides, Lena informed me you've been seeing each other. I'd rather you spend December building a foundation for your education than running yourself ragged at catering gigs. Consider it a selfish parental move to ensure my daughter's potential boyfriend isn't constantly exhausted. Boyfriend landed like a small bomb. It's still new. I don't know if we're at labels yet. Fair enough, but the job offer stands regardless. Think about it. Ethan discussed it with Lena that evening over dinner at a small Italian place near her apartment. She'd invited him out alone, arranging for Sophie to have a sleepover at Rachel's specifically so they could have adult time. He's not being subtle, Lena said, twirling pasta around her fork. The consulting job is real. He does need that research, but he's absolutely also trying to make your life easier because he likes you and wants me to be happy. Is that weird? Having your father so involved? Honestly, it's the most interested he's been in my personal life since before the accident. I spent years with him walking on eggshells around me, afraid to push or challenge because I was so fragile. Seeing him engage like this, even if it's overwhelming, feels healthy. She met his eyes. But if it makes you uncomfortable, I'll tell him to back off. It's not uncomfortable exactly, just unfamiliar. I'm used to figuring things out alone. You don't have to anymore. That's what I'm trying to show you. She reached across the table, taking his hand. Let people help. Let me help. You've been carrying everything solo for so long, Ethan. It's okay to share the weight. The simple touch, her hand warm in his, made his chest tight. I'm not good at that. Accepting help. Relying on people. I noticed. But here's the thing. I'm not good at letting people in, at being vulnerable. So maybe we can practice together. Take turns being brave when the other one's scared. They finished dinner and walked through downtown Chicago, breath-forming clouds in December cold, shoulders bumping companionably. The city was dressed for holidays, lights strung between buildings, storefronts advertising sales. Everything felt brighter, more vivid, like Ethan was seeing it all for the first time. Can I ask you something? Lena said as they paused at a crosswalk. What do you want? Long term, I mean. Beyond the shop, beyond practical goals. What does a happy life look like to you? Ethan considered the question seriously. Stability. Coming home to Sophie knowing I can provide for her without constant stress. Maybe owning our own place someday instead of renting. Having time for things beyond survival, reading, hobbies, relationships. Teaching Sophie that life can be more than struggle. He glanced at Lena. What about you? I want to feel useful. To do work that matters beyond tax deductions for wealthy donors. I want friendships that aren't based on networking value. And I want to stop being afraid all the time. Of judgment, of loss, of letting anyone see who I really am beneath the polished exterior. You've let me see you. I know. It's terrifying and wonderful simultaneously. They ended up at Lena's apartment, a beautiful space in a converted warehouse building with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. It was tastefully decorated but somehow impersonal, like a hotel room occupied by someone who hadn't quite committed to living there. I know it's sterile, Lena said, reading his expression. I've never been good at making spaces feel like home. My father hired a decorator after I moved in, and I just never changed anything. Ethan studied the generic art prints, the carefully coordinated color scheme. Where's your stuff? The things that actually matter to you. She led him to a spare bedroom she'd converted to an office. Here, finally, was evidence of actual personality. Bookshelves crammed with volumes on art history and social enterprise. A cluttered desk covered in project notes. Walls displaying children's artwork from foundation programs. In the corner sat an easel with a half-finished painting, an abstract piece in deep blues and greens. I didn't know you painted. I don't. Not really. I started after the accident, therapy homework to process grief. Turns out I'm mediocre at it, but I find it calming. She touched the canvas lightly. This is the first thing I've worked on in 2 years. Started it last Sunday after the museum. The painting was rough, emotional, rather than technical, but it captured something, movement and light and the suggestion of joy. It's beautiful. It's a mess, but it's my mess. She turned to face him. That's what I mean about letting you see me. This room, this painting, the fact that I'm mediocre at art despite running an arts foundation, I don't show people this part. It doesn't fit the polished image. Ethan moved closer, drawn by her honesty. I like this part better than the polish. Good, because the polish is exhausting to maintain. They kissed again, longer this time, her hands finding their way to his shoulders while his settled at her waist. It was gentle and searching, both of them moving carefully like people learning a new language together. When they finally broke apart, Lena's smile was soft and slightly dazed. That was nice. Very nice. I have a confession. I haven't done this, dating, kissing, any of it, in almost 6 years. I'm wildly out of practice. You're doing fine from where I'm standing. They spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing stories from their vastly different backgrounds, but finding unexpected parallels in their experiences of loss and isolation. Around 11, Ethan reluctantly called it a night, conscious of the late hour and Rachel waiting with Sophie. Same time next week? Lena asked at the door. I'd like that. Though fair warning, once school starts, my schedule gets complicated. We'll figure it out. She kissed him once more, quick and sweet. Thank you for tonight, for seeing my messy office and not running. Thank you for showing me. The next few days blurred together in preparation. Ethan accepted Richard's consulting position, spending his final pre-semester week reviewing electric vehicle proposals and writing up analysis that felt far more sophisticated than anything he'd done before. Richard provided feedback that was constructive rather than critical, treating Ethan like a peer rather than a charity case. Classes began on a frigid January Monday. Ethan dropped Sophie at daycare, kissed her goodbye, and rode the train to CTY with his stomach in knots. The first day was orientation and basic diagnostics, Dr. Chen introducing concepts that would form the foundation for everything that followed. Automotive technology is a language, she told them. Right now you're learning the alphabet. By the end of this program you'll be writing novels. But it requires dedication, no shortcuts, no excuses. Either you commit fully or you're wasting everyone's time. Ethan committed fully. He threw himself into coursework with an intensity that bordered on obsession, staying late in the workshop to practice procedures, spending nights reviewing electrical diagrams while Sophie slept. It was harder than he'd anticipated, not the physical work, but the mental gymnastics of understanding computerized systems and diagnostic protocols. Lena became his study partner and cheerleader, texting encouragement during his late nights, bringing coffee when she'd visit on weekends, helping quiz him on terminology he needed to memorize. Sophie adapted to the new routine with typical childhood resilience, proud that her daddy was in school just like her. 2 weeks into the semester, Ethan had his first real crisis of confidence. A practical exam on electrical systems went poorly, his hands shaking as he tried to trace a fault in a complex wiring harness. He'd made a fundamental error that Dr. Chen caught immediately. You're thinking too hard, she said, not unkindly. Trust your hands. You have good instincts, but you're overthinking every move. Relax. He called Lena that night, fighting back frustrated tears. I don't know if I can do this. Everyone else seems to get it so much faster. Everyone else isn't balancing school with single parenthood. Cut yourself some slack. Her voice was steady, grounding. You're 2 weeks in, Ethan. Give yourself time to learn. You didn't become a good father overnight, did you? That's different. How? You learned by doing, by making mistakes and adjusting. This is the same thing. You're allowed a learning curve. Her patience helped, as did Dr. Chen's practical approach to teaching. Slowly, gradually, the concepts began clicking into place. By the end of January, Ethan was keeping pace with his classmates, even excelling in certain areas where his hands-on experience gave him advantages. He and Lena found rhythms that worked for their complicated lives. Weekend brunches with Sophie, quiet dinners when Rachel could babysit, stolen phone conversations during his commutes. It wasn't conventional dating, but it was real and growing steadily deeper. In early February, Richard invited them both to dinner at his home, a stately house in the suburbs that spoke of old money and careful taste. Lena warned Ethan in advance. He's going to grill you about your intentions. It's mortifying, but he means well. Just be honest with him. The dinner was surprisingly warm despite Ethan's nervousness. Richard asked about school, about Sophie, about Ethan's long-term plans. The questioning was direct but not hostile. The curiosity of a father protecting his daughter while genuinely wanting to know the man she was choosing. You make her happy, Richard said as they sat in his study after dinner, drinking expensive whiskey Ethan couldn't properly appreciate. I haven't seen her this engaged with life in years. That matters more to me than any background check or financial statement. I care about her deeply. I can see that. I can also see you're terrified of disappointing her. Ethan took a careful sip of whiskey. I'm terrified of disappointing everyone. You, her, Sophie. I'm just a guy trying to build a better life. I don't know if I'm enough for someone like Lena. That's fear talking. My daughter doesn't need someone perfect. She needs someone real, someone who sees her clearly and chooses her anyway. You've demonstrated that from the first moment you asked her to dance. Richard's expression grew thoughtful. Michael would have liked you. He had a talent for seeing potential in people others overlooked. I'm trying to honor that by doing the same. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the words stayed with Ethan. Someone real who sees her clearly and chooses her anyway. He could be that. He was already trying to be that. February became March, and Ethan found his footing in school. His grades were solid, his practical skills improving steadily. The consulting work for Richard evolved into a genuine collaboration, Ethan's growing knowledge making him increasingly valuable for the fleet conversion project. Sophie's 6th birthday arrived in mid-March, and Lena helped plan a party at their apartment, a small gathering with Rachel, Marcus, Mrs. Chen from down the hall, and a few kids from daycare. Lena brought an elaborate dinosaur cake and spent the afternoon playing elaborate games with 6-year-olds without complaint. Watching her laugh with Sophie and her friends, chocolate frosting on her cheek, completely unself-conscious and happy, Ethan felt something shift definitively in his chest. This was what love felt like, not the desperate passion of his youth with Melissa, but something steadier and deeper, a sense of rightness, of building something sustainable and real. That night, after the party debris was cleaned and Sophie was asleep, Lena helped wash dishes in their tiny kitchen. "Thank you for today," Ethan said. "You didn't have to go to all that trouble." "I wanted to. Sophie's important to you, which makes her important to me." Lena dried a plate carefully. "Besides, I had fun. I don't remember the last time I just played without worrying about appearances or judgment. You're good at this. Being part of our chaos. Your chaos feels like home." She set down the plate and turned to face him. "I know we said we'd take this slow, no pressure, but I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you, with both of you, and I just wanted you to know that, even if it's too soon or too much." Ethan's hands were wet with dishwater. His apartment was cramped and shabby. His life was still held together with determination and duct tape. But standing in his kitchen with this remarkable woman who'd chosen him despite having every reason not to, he felt wealthier than he'd ever been. "It's not too soon," he said quietly, "because I'm falling in love with you too." They kissed, surrounded by birthday party remnants and the gentle sounds of the city outside their windows, building something new from pieces that had seemed broken beyond repair. And for the first time in longer than Ethan could remember, the future felt less like a threat and more like a promise. Spring arrived in Chicago with the tentative hope it always carried, trees budding green along city streets and the air losing its bitter edge. Ethan's first semester was drawing to a close, final exams looming like mountains he'd have to climb, with nothing but the knowledge he'd frantically accumulated over 3 intense months. The night before his comprehensive practical exam, he sat at their kitchen table surrounded by diagrams and study guides, his head pounding from information overload. Sophie had long since gone to bed, and the apartment was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and his neighbor's television through thin walls. His phone buzzed. Lena's name lit up the screen. "You're still awake," she said when he answered. "I can hear the stress in your breathing from here." "How do you know I'm stressed?" "I haven't said anything yet." "Because I know you. You're panicking about tomorrow, convinced you're going to fail despite the fact that Dr. Chen told you last week your practical skills are in the top quarter of your class." Ethan rubbed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. "That was last week. Tomorrow I have to diagnose and repair 3 separate vehicle malfunctions in under 4 hours. What if I freeze? What if everything I've learned just evaporates?" "Then you take a breath and trust your hands. You've done this work before, Ethan. You've been fixing cars since you were a teenager. The only difference is now you understand the theory behind what you're doing." Her voice softened. "Do you want me to come over? I can bring ice cream and talk you down from the ledge." "It's almost midnight. You have work tomorrow. And you have an exam. Which is more important?" Before he could answer, she continued, I'm already in my car. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Put the books away. True to her word, Lena arrived with a pint of chocolate ice cream and a determined expression. She'd clearly thrown on whatever was handy: yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun, face free of makeup. Ethan had never seen her look more beautiful. Come on. She took his hand and led him to the couch, pushing his study materials aside. We're taking a break. You're going to eat ice cream, tell me one good thing that happened today, and then you're going to sleep. Your brain needs rest more than it needs more cramming. One good thing? Ethan accepted the spoon she handed him. Sophie drew a picture of the three of us today. You, me, and her. She asked when you're going to move in with us. Lena's expression flickered with something complicated, pleasure and nervousness mixed together. What did you tell her? That adults need to take things slow, and we're still figuring out what our relationship looks like. But she seemed to think it was a foregone conclusion. 6-year-old logic is very straightforward. She's not wrong to see it that way. Lena took a small bite of ice cream. I spend more time here than at my own place. My toothbrush is in your bathroom. Half my clothes are in your closet. We're basically cohabitating already, just inefficiently. Ethan's heart did something complicated in his chest. Are you saying you want to move in? I'm saying I've been thinking about it. But that's a conversation for after your exam, when you're not running on 3 hours of sleep and panic. She shifted closer, her shoulder pressing against his. For now, just know that I'm not going anywhere. Exam or no exam, top quarter or bottom quarter, I'm here. They finished the ice cream in comfortable silence, and Lena stayed until Ethan finally admitted he was ready to sleep. She kissed him goodnight at the door, her hands framing his face with tender certainty. You're going to be brilliant tomorrow, she whispered. Trust yourself the way I trust you. The exam was brutal, Doctor. Chen had selected 3 vehicles with deliberately obscure malfunctions. An intermittent electrical fault that took Ethan 90 minutes to trace, a cooling system problem that required complete disassembly to diagnose, and a transmission issue that tested every bit of theory he'd learned. His hands shook as he worked, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool workshop temperature. But Lena's words echoed in his mind. Trust your hands. And gradually, the panic receded. His body remembered what his anxious brain tried to forget. The diagnostic procedures became automatic, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. When Dr. Chen called time, Ethan had completed all 3 repairs correctly. Well done, Brooks. Dr. Chen made notes on her clipboard. Your electrical diagnosis was particularly thorough. You've come a long way since that first week when you couldn't tell a resistor from a relay. The relief was so intense it made him lightheaded. Thank you. I couldn't have done this without your teaching. My teaching only works when students put in the effort. You've earned this. She paused, studying him with sharp eyes. I'm recommending you for the advanced diagnostics track next semester. It's optional, but beneficial if you're serious about running your own shop. Think about it. Ethan walked out of CTY that afternoon feeling 10 pounds lighter. He called Lena immediately. I passed. All 3 repairs completed on time. Her squeal of delight made him pull the phone away from his ear. I knew it. I'm so proud of you. This calls for celebration. Dinner tonight? My treat, anywhere you want. Can Sophie come? Of course Sophie can come. She's your official good luck charm. Pick her up from school and meet me at that pizza place she loves on Ashland. 6 o'clock. The celebration was perfect in its simplicity. Sophie dominated conversation with stories about her day, Lena listened with genuine interest, and Ethan allowed himself to just be happy. No anxiety about the future, no guilt about accepting help, just pure enjoyment of the moment. After dinner, walking back to the train, Sophie grabbed both their hands and swung between them. Lena, are you going to be my new mommy? The question came with the casual directness only children possessed. Ethan's step faltered, but Lena handled it with remarkable grace. She crouched to Sophie's level, taking the little girl's hands in hers. I can't replace your mommy, sweetheart, but I can be someone who loves you and your daddy very much. Would that be okay? Sophie considered this with 6-year-old seriousness. Will you always stay, or will you leave like mommy did? The question landed like a punch. Ethan opened his mouth to intervene, but Lena spoke first. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, because life is unpredictable. But I can promise that I choose to be here. I choose you and your daddy every single day. And if something scary happens, we'll face it together. Does that make sense? Sophie nodded slowly. Okay. Can we get ice cream now? Just like that, the heavy moment passed, replaced by negotiations about dessert. But later, after Sophie was asleep and Lena had stayed to help with bedtime, she and Ethan sat on the couch in the dim living room. I meant what I told her, Lena said quietly. I'm choosing this. Choosing both of you. I know my track record isn't great with commitment. I've spent years avoiding exactly this kind of vulnerability. But I'm all in, Ethan, if you'll have me. If I'll have you, Ethan's laugh was slightly strangled. Lena, you're the best thing that's happened to me besides Sophie. I'm terrified of how much I need you. Then be terrified with me. We'll figure it out together. They made the decision that night. Lena would move in over the summer after Ethan's second semester concluded. They'd look for a bigger place, somewhere Sophie could have her own room, and Lena could set up a proper home office. It felt huge and terrifying and absolutely right. The following weeks blurred into finals and final projects. Ethan poured everything into his coursework, determined to prove Dr. Chen's recommendation wasn't misplaced. His final grades came back in late May, a solid B+ average with an A in practical diagnostics. Not perfect, but respectable, earned through sweat and late nights and refusing to quit when it got hard. Richard hosted a small graduation dinner at his house, inviting Ethan, Sophie, Lena, and Rachel. The evening had an informal family quality that made Ethan's chest tight with emotion he couldn't quite name. To Ethan, Richard raised his glass, who has demonstrated that second chances, when earned and honored, can change not just individual lives, but entire trajectories. Your uncle would be proud, Sophie. Your daddy is doing remarkable things. Sophie beamed with pride she didn't fully understand, and Ethan fought back tears as glasses clinked around the table. Later, Richard pulled him aside into the same study where they'd first talked about intentions and fear. I have a proposition. The consulting work you've been doing on the fleet conversion has been invaluable. I'd like to formalize it into a permanent contract, 20 hours weekly, with the understanding that it's secondary to your education. But it would provide steady income and keep you connected to the company. Richard, you don't have to keep creating opportunities for me. I'm not creating anything. This is legitimate business need. Richard's expression was sincere. You've proven yourself capable and reliable. The work is real. The compensation is fair. Stop thinking of it as charity and start thinking of it as the career you're building. Ethan accepted because Richard was right. It wasn't charity. He'd earned this through competent work and dedication. The mental shift from receiver of help to valued professional was subtle but significant. Summer arrived with characteristic Chicago humidity, the city transforming into a steam bath punctuated by fierce thunderstorms. Ethan and Lena spent weekends apartment hunting, dragging Sophie along to view places that ranged from barely affordable to laughably out of budget. This one has a yard, Sophie announced at a small house in a neighborhood transitioning from rough to revitalized. I could have a dog. We're not getting a dog, Ethan and Lena said simultaneously, then laughed at the synchronization. The house was a stretch financially, but the landlord was willing to work with them. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, walking distance to Sophie's school, and a decent train line for Ethan's commute. It needed work. The kitchen was ancient, the bathroom tiles cracked, but it had potential. We could make this work, Lena said, standing in the empty living room and visualizing possibilities. Fresh paint, some repairs, maybe refinish these hardwood floors. It could be really beautiful. It's more than I ever thought I could afford. It's more than either of us could afford alone. But together, she took his hand. Together we can build something here. They signed the lease in June, moved in over a sweltering July weekend with help from Marcus, Rachel, and a surprisingly hands-on Richard who showed up in old clothes ready to carry boxes. Sophie claimed the bedroom with windows overlooking the backyard, immediately planning where her stuffed animals would live. Lena's belongings arrived in a moving truck that seemed excessive for someone who claimed to live minimally. But unpacking revealed the accumulated possessions of a life she'd been storing rather than displaying. Art supplies, books, photo albums from before the accident, her mother's jewelry carefully preserved in velvet boxes. I haven't looked at these in years, she said, sitting on their bedroom floor surrounded by memories. I packed everything away after Mom died, couldn't stand seeing reminders. Ethan sat beside her, picking up a photo of a younger Lena with a woman who shared her features. She was beautiful. You look like her. Everyone says that. I used to hate it because it made the loss harder. But lately, Lena traced her mother's face in the photograph. Lately, I'm glad to carry pieces of her forward. I think she'd like you. She always said the measure of a person was how they treated people who couldn't benefit them. You've proven that measure over and over. They spent the evening unpacking memories and building new ones, transforming empty rooms into a home that belonged to all three of them. August brought Ethan's second semester, the advanced diagnostics track Dr. Chen had recommended. The coursework was significantly more challenging, diving deep into computerized engine management and hybrid vehicle systems. But this time, Ethan wasn't facing it alone. Lena helped him build study schedules. Sophie was patient when Daddy needed quiet time to concentrate, and the stability of their shared home made everything easier. The consulting work for Richard expanded as well. The fleet conversion was moving into implementation phase, requiring Ethan's input on service protocols and training for company drivers. He found himself in meetings with executives, his opinions valued and implemented. The imposter syndrome never fully disappeared, but it quieted to manageable levels. In September, on a cool evening that hinted at coming autumn, Lena made dinner while Ethan helped Sophie with homework at the kitchen table. The domesticity of it struck him suddenly. The comfortable rhythm they'd built, the way Sophie automatically went to Lena with questions about her schoolwork, how Lena knew exactly how he took his coffee and which mug was his favorite. This was family. Not the fractured, struggling unit he'd maintained alone for years, but something whole and sustainable. "Lena," he said after Sophie had gone to play, "do you ever regret this? Choosing us? You could have had an easier life with someone who came with less baggage." She turned from the stove, wooden spoon in hand, and fixed him with a look of such fierce certainty it took his breath away. "I spent 8 years choosing the easy path, hiding, avoiding, playing it safe. And I was miserable and alone. You and Sophie are the hardest thing I've ever done. Opening myself up to this much vulnerability, this much potential for loss. But you're also the best thing, the most real thing. So no, I don't regret choosing you. I regret all the years I wasted being too afraid to choose anything." That night, after dinner was cleaned and Sophie was tucked in bed, Ethan pulled Lena close on their couch, a secondhand find they'd reupholstered together, and held her like she was precious. Because she was. Because somehow, impossibly, this brilliant woman had chosen him and his daughter and their complicated life. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I don't say it enough, but I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too. Both of you. My little chaotic family." October arrived with the crisp air and brilliant foliage that made Chicago briefly magical. Ethan was midway through his second semester, maintaining strong grades and building relationships with classmates who'd gone from strangers to friends. The isolation that had defined his life for so long had been replaced by community, people who checked in on him, who understood the unique challenges of balancing education with life, who celebrated his successes and supported through setbacks. Dr. Chen called him into her office one afternoon in late October. "Brooks, I wanted to discuss your trajectory. Your technical skills are excellent, but I think you're underselling your leadership potential. Have you considered teaching?" The question caught him completely off guard. "Teaching? I'm barely staying ahead of the material myself." "Now, yes, but after graduation, we need instructors who remember what it's like to struggle, who can connect with students from non-traditional backgrounds. You have that ability." She slid a brochure across her desk. "This is a certificate program for automotive instruction. 1 additional semester after you graduate. I think you should seriously consider it." Teaching had never occurred to him. His dreams had always centered on the shop, on building something tangible with his hands. But as he read through the program description, something stirred in his chest. The chance to help others the way Dr. Chen had helped him, to create pathways for people who needed second chances. He discussed it with Lena that evening as they prepped vegetables for dinner, Sophie coloring at the table. "It would mean delaying the shop for another semester," he said, chopping carrots with the precision his coursework had taught him. "Another semester of being a student instead of earning real money." "Okay, what does your gut say?" Ethan paused, really examining his instincts. "My gut says I'd be good at it. that I'd find it fulfilling, but it also feels like I'm moving goalposts, changing plans when I should be following through. Or it feels like you're discovering new possibilities you hadn't considered before. Lena stirred the pot on the stove. The shop isn't going anywhere, Ethan, but the chance to shape how automotive technology is taught, to help people like you who need access to these skills, that's valuable too. You don't have to choose one or the other permanently. You could teach and run a shop. Lots of people do both. The idea settled into his mind like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Why not both? Why limit himself to one dream when he could build something larger? I'll talk to Dr. Chen on Monday. Ask what the program entails. Sophie looked up from her coloring. Are you going to be a teacher like Mrs. Patterson? Maybe, baby. Would that be okay with you? Yeah, then you can give me good grades on everything. Lena laughed. That's not how it works, sweetheart. Daddy would teach grown-ups about fixing cars, not first graders. Oh, that's less fun. The conversation moved on to Sophie's day and weekend plans, but the seed had been planted. Ethan found himself imagining standing in front of a classroom, sharing knowledge hard-won through struggle and determination, helping people build better futures through education. It felt right in a way that surprised him. November brought the one-year anniversary of the gala, the dance that had changed everything. Lena surprised him by arranging for Richard to babysit Sophie while they returned to the Harrington Grand Hotel for dinner. I wanted to mark the occasion, she explained as they dressed for the evening. 1 year ago, a waiter asked me to dance and changed my entire life. That feels worth celebrating. They ate in the hotel restaurant, which was elegant but less intimidating than the ballroom. Over wine and carefully prepared food, they reflected on the year's transformation. I was so angry that night, Lena said, at my father for making me attend, at those men for their cruelty, at myself for caring what they thought. I was ready to leave early, make up some excuse about not feeling well. And then you appeared, asking me to dance like it was the most natural thing in the world. It felt insane at the time. I knew I was risking my job, probably embarrassing both of us, but I couldn't walk away. I'm so glad you didn't. She reached across the table, taking his hand. You gave me permission to be seen, to stop hiding. Everything good in my life now traces back to that moment. Same for me. That dance led to your father's offer, which led to school, which led to everything we've built together. After dinner, they walked through the hotel and found their way to the Crystal Ballroom. It was empty tonight, no event scheduled, but the staff let them enter. The chandeliers were dimmed but still cast their gentle light across the marble floors. May I have this dance? Ethan offered his hand with exaggerated formality. Lena laughed, accepting. You may, though fair warning you're much better at this now than you were a year ago. They swayed together in the empty ballroom, no music except the memory of that first waltz. Ethan held Lena close, breathing in her familiar scent, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. Marry me, he said quietly. Lena pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. What? Marry me. I don't have a ring yet, and this probably isn't the romantic proposal you deserve, but I can't imagine my life without you. You and Sophie, you're my family. Let me make it official. Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks, reflecting chandelier light. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. They kissed in the center of the ballroom where they'd first danced, building new memories over the foundation of old ones. The night that had begun with a simple act of kindness had spiraled into love and family and a future neither of them could have predicted. And as Ethan held his fiancée in the quiet grandeur of the Crystal Ballroom, he silently thanked Captain Michael Harrington for saving his life all those years ago. Because that salvation had led here, to this moment, to a happiness he'd stopped believing was possible. Sometimes one choice, one dance, one moment of choosing courage over comfort could change everything. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the person you helped would turn around and save you right back. Richard's reaction to the engagement news was characteristically overwhelming. When they picked up Sophie that evening and shared the announcement, he pulled them both into a bear hug that lifted Lena off her feet. Finally! I was beginning to think you'd never ask. He set his daughter down and turned to Ethan with suspiciously bright eyes. Welcome to the family, son. Officially this time. Sophie, who'd been briefed on the way over, launched herself at both of them. Does this mean Lena gets to be my forever person now? Forever person, Lena repeated, crouching to Sophie's level. I like that better than stepmother. Can that be my official title? Forever person it is. Sophie's gap-toothed grin was radiant. Can I be in the wedding? Emma at school was a flower girl once, and she got to wear a fancy dress and throw flowers everywhere. You can absolutely be in the wedding. The most important person in the wedding, actually. Planning a wedding while finishing an intensive academic program proved challenging, but Lena approached it with the same methodical efficiency she brought to foundation work. They decided on a small ceremony in late spring, after Ethan's graduation from both his technical program and the teaching certificate course he'd enrolled in. Nothing elaborate, Lena insisted as they sat with Richard one Sunday afternoon discussing arrangements. I don't want the spectacle of a society wedding, just family and close friends, somewhere meaningful. The ballroom at the Grand? Richard suggested. Since that's where the story began? Ethan and Lena exchanged glances. The symmetry was appealing, coming full circle to the place where a waiter had asked a lonely woman to dance. The ballroom, Ethan agreed, but small, maybe 50 people maximum. Done. I'll handle the arrangements. Consider it your wedding gift. Winter settled over Chicago with its usual brutal efficiency. Ethan's final semester was punishing, balancing advanced automotive courses with the pedagogy classes required for teaching certification. He'd wake at 5 to study before Sophie needed breakfast, attend classes until 3, then work on consulting projects for Richard until Sophie's bedtime. The schedule was unsustainable long-term, but it was temporary. A means to an end. Dr. Chen pulled him aside in January, her expression serious. Brooks, I'm concerned about your workload. Your grades are still solid, but I can see the exhaustion. You're running yourself ragged. I'm managing. Just a few more months. That's what everyone says right before they collapse. She handed him a folder. I'm offering you a teaching assistant position for next fall. Paid position, 15 hours weekly, helping with introductory courses while you continue the certificate program. It would mean one less outside job to juggle. The offer was generous, typical of Dr. Chen's quiet support. Ethan accepted gratefully, feeling another piece of his future click into place. February brought Valentine's Day, and Ethan's first attempt at planning something romantic as an engaged man. He arranged for Rachel to take Sophie overnight, made reservations at a restaurant Lena had mentioned loving, and bought flowers from the corner bodega. This is perfect, Lena said as they sat across from each other at the small Italian place, candles flickering between them. You didn't have to go to all this trouble. Yes, I did. You've been planning our entire wedding while working full-time and managing my stress. The least I can do is feed you properly. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I know I'm not always easy to be with. The studying, the exhaustion, the constant worry about money and time. But I want you to know I see everything you do. How you make Sophie's lunch when I'm running late. How you quiz me on diagnostic procedures while doing laundry. How you've turned our house into an actual home. You're carrying so much weight, and I'm grateful every single day. Lena's eyes glistened. We're partners. That's what partners do. Carry weight together. Though I appreciate the acknowledgement, and the flowers, and this wine, which is excellent. They talked through dinner about plans beyond the wedding, where the shop should be located, how to structure the community outreach programs Lena had been developing, whether they wanted more children someday. The conversations were both practical and dreaming, mapping futures that felt increasingly possible. I want more kids, Lena admitted over dessert. I didn't think I did for the longest time. But watching you with Sophie, seeing what family can look like when it's healthy and loving, I want that. Maybe a couple years after the wedding? Ethan's heart swelled at the image. Sophie, with siblings, their house filled with the chaos of multiple children, building something that could weather generations. I'd like that too. Sophie would be an amazing big sister. She'd be bossy and overprotective and absolutely perfect at it. They walked home through February cold, bundled against wind that cut through their jackets, hands clasped together in Lena's coat pocket. The neighborhood was quiet, windows glowing with warm light, the city settling into evening rhythms. I'm happy, Lena said suddenly. I just wanted to say that out loud. For years I wasn't sure I'd ever feel this way again, and now I'm happy. Because of you. The feeling is entirely mutual. March arrived with unpredictable weather, sunshine one day and snowstorms the next. Ethan took his final exams with steady confidence, the panic of previous semesters replaced by genuine competence. When Dr. Chen posted grades, he'd earned straight A's in his technical courses and a B+ in pedagogical theory. "You're ready," she told him at their final advising meeting. "You have the skills to be both an excellent technician and an excellent teacher. Don't waste either talent." Graduation was a small ceremony, nothing like the elaborate productions of major universities. But sitting in the CTI auditorium surrounded by his classmates, wearing a rented cap and gown, while Sophie waved frantically from the audience between Lena and Rachel, Ethan felt pride swell in his chest. He'd done this. Despite every obstacle, every moment of doubt, he'd completed one of the hardest things he'd ever attempted. When his name was called, Sophie's cheer was the loudest in the room. The celebration afterward was at their house, the backyard strung with lights, even though it was barely warm enough to be outside. Richard had catered food, Rachel brought enough beer to supply a much larger party, and Marcus showed up with a gift-wrapped toolbox that made Ethan tear up. "For your shop," Marcus said gruffly. "Every master mechanic needs proper tools." Sophie appointed herself official party host, directing guests and ensuring everyone had cake. She'd insisted on helping Lena bake it, which meant the frosting was slightly lopsided but made with love. As evening settled and the party wound down, Ethan found himself standing at the back door watching his family and friends scattered across the small yard. This was success, not wealth or status, but connection. People who showed up, who celebrated milestones, who'd weathered struggles together and come out stronger. "Proud of you." Richard appeared beside him, beer in hand. "Michael would be too. You've honored his sacrifice by building something meaningful. I think about him often. Wonder what he'd think of all this." "I know exactly what he'd think. He'd say you proved him right, that you were worth saving, worth believing in, and he'd probably make some joke about you taking long enough to figure it out." Richard's smile was bittersweet. "My brother had a talent for seeing potential in people. He saw it in you 12 years ago, and time has proven him correct." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Lena teach Sophie some complicated hand-clapping game that involved a lot of laughter and missed beats. "I'm going to ask her to adopt Sophie," Ethan said quietly. "After the wedding. Make it legal, not just emotional. Is that presumptuous?" "It's perfect. And she'll say yes." Richard clapped his shoulder. "You're giving my daughter the family she thought she'd lost forever. That's a gift beyond measure." The wedding planning intensified as spring bloomed across Chicago. Lena managed details with impressive efficiency, but the stress showed in small ways. The tension in her shoulders, the late nights spent confirming vendor contracts, the anxiety about guest lists and seating arrangements. One evening in April, Ethan found her crying in their bedroom, surrounded by fabric swatches and invitation samples. "Hey, what's wrong?" He sat beside her, pulling her close. "Everything, nothing. I just want this to be perfect, and I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up somehow. What if the flowers are wrong? What if the caterer cancels? What if I trip walking down the aisle and everyone sees me fall?" "Then we'll pick you up and keep going. Lena, this wedding is about us making promises to each other. Everything else is just decoration." He tilted her chin up gently. "We could get married at City Hall tomorrow in jeans, and I'd be just as committed. The fancy venue and flowers are lovely, but they're not what matters. I know, logically, I know that. But this is my only wedding, probably my only chance to have this experience, and part of me wants it to be the fairy tale I dreamed about as a little girl before life got complicated." "Okay, then we'll make it the fairy tale. But remember, the best part of any fairy tale is the happily ever after, not the party. And we've already started building that." She leaned against him, tension gradually easing. "How did you get so wise?" "Single parenting. You learn to focus on what actually matters when you don't have energy for anything else." They simplified the plans after that conversation, cutting elements that created stress without adding meaning. The result was more intimate, more authentically them. Sophie's role as flower girl was taken with utmost seriousness. She practiced walking slowly and scattering petals with the dedication of someone preparing for Olympic competition. Lena took her shopping for a dress, returning with a purple confection that made Sophie look like a small princess. "It's perfect," Sophie announced, twirling in the living room. "I'm going to be the best flower girl ever." "No doubt about that," Ethan agreed, snapping photos while Lena laughed. The week before the wedding, Richard pulled Ethan aside after a family dinner. "I have something for you. For both of you, really." He handed over a folder. "This is the deed to a commercial property in Pilsen. It's been sitting empty for 6 months, former repair shop that closed when the owner retired. The space needs work, but the bones are good. I'm offering it to you at a very favorable lease rate as a wedding gift for your shop." Ethan stared at the documents, not quite processing. "Richard, this is too much. It's a business arrangement. You need a location. I have a property generating no income. This way we both benefit. Besides, Lena's put together a comprehensive business plan for Brooks Automotive that's actually quite impressive. I'd be foolish not to invest in a venture this well conceived." "Brooks Automotive? That's what you're calling it, isn't it? Unless you've chosen something else." The name settled over Ethan like a comfortable coat. Brooks Automotive. Simple, honest, his name on something he'd built. "No, that's perfect. I just can't believe this is really happening." "Believe it. You've earned every bit of this success. Now stop being sentimental and let's go look at your new shop tomorrow. Lena's already scheduled a walkthrough." The property was everything Richard had described. A solid building with good light, 3 service bays, a small office space, and room for expansion. It needed paint and updated equipment, but the potential was obvious. Lena walked through making notes, already envisioning the layout. "We could put a waiting area here with coffee and comfortable seating. Make it welcoming instead of the typical garage grimness. And this office space could be both your workspace and a small classroom for apprenticeships. You've thought about this extensively." "I might have spent a few months developing a complete operational plan, in my spare time." Her smile was playful. "I'm very invested in this shop's success, personally and professionally." They spent the afternoon measuring and planning, imagining the community hub the shop could become. A place that fixed cars and fixed lives, providing skills training and fair prices in a neighborhood that needed both. The wedding day arrived with perfect May weather, the kind of spring afternoon that made Chicago briefly paradise. The Crystal Ballroom was transformed with simple white flowers and soft lighting, elegant without being ostentatious. 50 guests filled chairs arranged in a semicircle around a small platform where Ethan stood with Marcus as his best man, waiting. Then Sophie appeared at the ballroom entrance in her purple dress, carrying a basket of rose petals. She walked with exaggerated care, scattering flowers with artistic precision, her face serious with concentration. When she reached the front, she stage whispered to Ethan, "I did perfect, right?" "Absolutely perfect, sweetheart." And then Lena appeared, and Ethan forgot to breathe. She wore a simple ivory dress that somehow made her look both ethereal and grounded, her hair swept up to reveal the scar she no longer tried to hide. She walked toward him without hesitation, her smile radiant and certain. Richard escorted her, tears streaming openly down his face. When they reached the platform, he placed Lena's hand in Ethan's and whispered something that made her laugh before taking his seat. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, promises made not to some idealized future but to the messy, beautiful reality they'd already built together. "I promise to see you clearly," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Not as Richard Harrington's daughter, or the woman with the scar, but as Lena. Complex, brilliant, kind, stubborn Lena, who chose me when she had every reason not to. "I promise to choose you back, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Lena's vows were equally honest. "I promise to be your partner in every sense of that word, to carry weight when you're tired, to celebrate victories, to build this life together day by day. You asked me to dance when I was hiding from the world, and you've been teaching me to be brave ever since. I promise to keep learning that lesson, to keep choosing vulnerability and connection over safety and isolation, to be Sophie's forever person and your always person." When the officiant pronounced them married, the kiss was gentle and filled with promise. Sophie cheered so loudly several guests laughed, and the moment was perfect in its imperfection. The reception was joyful chaos. Sophie danced with anyone willing, spinning in her purple dress until she was dizzy. Marcus got unexpectedly emotional during his toast. Rachel told embarrassing stories about Ethan's childhood, and Richard welcomed Ethan to the family with a speech that had half the room in tears. But the moment that mattered most came late in the evening, as the party wound down and most guests had departed. Ethan and Lena stood alone on the dance floor, swaying to music only they could hear, while Sophie slept in a chair nearby, exhausted from celebration. "A year and a half ago, I stood here terrified and alone," Lena murmured against his shoulder. "And you appeared out of nowhere and asked me to dance. Best decision I ever made. Second best. The best was saying yes to everything that came after." She pulled back to look at him. "I love you, Ethan Brooks. I love the life we're building, the family we've created, the future spreading out ahead of us. I love you too. You and Sophie. You're everything." They danced in the quiet ballroom, husband and wife now, building on the foundation laid by one simple act of courage. The chandeliers cast their gentle light, witness to both the beginning and this new chapter. 2 months later, Brooks Automotive officially opened in the renovated Pilsen location. The grand opening drew neighborhood residents curious about the new business, students from CT1 interested in apprenticeships, and a surprising number of Harrington Industries employees who'd heard about the shop's community focus. Ethan stood in the main bay wearing coveralls with his name embroidered on the pocket, surveying his shop with quiet pride. 3 service bays, all equipped with modern diagnostic equipment. A comfortable waiting area with coffee and children's books where Sophie currently colored while helping greet customers. A small classroom space where he'd start teaching evening courses next month through CTY's continuing education program. Lena had organized the opening with characteristic efficiency, ensuring press coverage and community partnership announcements. The foundation had committed to funding a youth apprenticeship program, and 3 local nonprofits had already signed up for discounted fleet services. "You ready for this?" Marcus asked, surveying the line of cars already scheduled for service. "Ready as I'll ever be," Ethan grinned. "Let's fix some cars." The first customer was a single mother with a rattling engine and obvious anxiety about cost. Ethan diagnosed the problem, a simple belt issue, and charged her half his usual rate. "I can't let you do that," she protested. "You're running a business." "I'm running the business I want to run, one that serves the community fairly. You need reliable transportation to get to work. I have the skills to provide that. This is the price." She cried when he handed her the invoice, thanking him repeatedly. It was exactly the moment Ethan had envisioned, using his skills to help people caught in the same struggles he'd known intimately. By closing time, they'd served 8 customers, hired 2 apprentices from CTY's program, and scheduled enough work to keep the shop busy for weeks. Rachel stopped by with dinner. Richard sent an enormous congratulatory flower arrangement, and Dr. Chen called to congratulate him on the opening. That evening, after Sophie was asleep and the house was quiet, Ethan and Lena sat on their back porch watching fireflies drift through the warm summer air. "It's everything I hoped it would be," Ethan said. "The shop, I mean. It feels right in a way nothing else ever has." "Because you built it with integrity. From the ground up, every decision based on your values rather than just profit." Lena rested her head on his shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, of everything you've accomplished." "We accomplished. None of this happens without you. We make a good team." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night. Somewhere in the distance, the city hummed with its endless activity. But here, in their small backyard with their sleeping daughter inside and their future spreading out like a promise, everything was exactly as it should be. Ethan thought about the path that had led here, from desperate single father working multiple jobs to shop owner and teacher, from invisible waiter to valued partner, from survivor of tragedy to builder of community. Every struggle, every moment of doubt, every time he'd chosen to keep fighting had led to this. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For accepting that dance, for seeing me when I was furniture, for choosing us when you could have chosen easier." Lena lifted her head to kiss him softly. "Thank you for asking, for seeing me past the scar and the silence, for teaching me that hiding isn't the same as safety and that real love requires real courage." And inside, Sophie called out in her sleep, some dream making her mumble about dinosaurs and purple dresses. They both smiled at the familiar sound. "We should check on her," Lena said. "In a minute. I just want to sit here with you a little longer." So they stayed, husband and wife, watching fireflies dance while their daughter dreamed, building a life that honored both sacrifice and hope. A life that proved sometimes the smallest acts of courage could create the largest transformations. And in the morning, Ethan would open his shop again, teaching and fixing and serving his community. Lena would continue her foundation work, creating pathways for others to build better futures. Sophie would grow up knowing she was cherished, surrounded by people who chose to show up and stay. The story that began with one dance in a crowded ballroom had become something neither of them could have imagined. A family forged from broken pieces, a business built on integrity, a future bright with possibility. Not because everything was perfect, but because they'd learned that perfection wasn't the goal. Connection was. Courage was. Choosing each other day after day through the mundane and the magnificent. That was enough. That was everything.